because I don't know where we post them. I didn't see that, so.
It should be at the top of the agendas.
Is everybody here? Looks like. All right. Well, we're joining a little bit late. We had an earlier meeting that went a little bit long, but at this time I'll call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for May 20th, 2021. Commissioner Kula, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Really. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Chair.
All right. At this time, we'll go over our joint calendar. And Ken, you've got an item for us to add to our calendar?
Yes. So we need to, and maybe we don't need to pick a specific date, but if getting the green light that we work with the sheriff's office and the jail commander for scheduling a jail tour. We have to schedule a tour of both the jail and detention each year. And so we're hoping to get that on the calendar for sometime in June. And I should say I need to work with the detention manager as well, not just the jail. And so we can schedule a date. And if there are specific dates that we should avoid or days of the week.
Chair, my only other set thing is my commitment to facilitate the roundtable at 3 p.m. on Tuesdays. Everything else I think is flexible except for this meeting.
And the other suggestion might be is maybe picking a day other than Thursdays, because it does seem like with the length that a lot of our formal sessions have been going, there might be some challenges for scheduling. And just knowing that we're going to have a very busy upcoming formal sessions with work sessions, budget adoption, and some land use hearings coming up. So
would Tuesday at, let's say, 11, a Tuesday at 11 or 10:30?
That works for me, Chair. The only thing I have is the middle of the month is last day. So, but that's on a Thursday. We're avoiding that day anyway. So.
And Ken and Christian and I meet Tuesdays at 10. So 11 would be perfect.
Okay, 11.
We meet at 11, so, but maybe we can just reschedule. That's fine. We can just move it.
Or 1:30.
That would work for me, Chair.
1:30 on a Tuesday sometime?
I have to check though again now with COVID.
okay, so I heard I'm sorry, I'm getting questions. I'm getting bombarded with kind of questions, and so it sounds like we're going to look for a Tuesday. And the other thing is we'll have to work with the jail and detention, because we also need to be sensitive to that, depending on when counts are occurring and meal periods, that's sometimes it's a real difficult time for the jail staff. So navigate. So we'll at least start the conversation, and then we'll circle back with the board once we have a couple dates just to confirm that everyone's still available.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, if there's nothing else to add to our joint calendar, we'll move on to public comment. And boy, did we receive public comments. I want to thank Carolina for facilitating that. They have come in fast and furious regarding 2 agenda items, which we can discuss later on. And I want to thank everybody who took the time to send those. This again was an absolute onslaught of public comment, and I appreciate the time people took. So we'll move on to our work session, which is item E, and that's reserved for topics of discussion. We continue our discussion of the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan funds, and the areas of priority. I know that last time we met, our administrator had asked us to send our lists to him, and we've been sending those lists in. So perhaps maybe now we can just get an overview of where we're at with those, Ken, because I'm guessing that we still are just in the initial stages.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I need to close some things. I've got too many distractions happening. So really quick, I have been receiving information from commissioners. I'm currently compiling those into a folder. And what I'd like to do is I'm hoping that possibly next week or the following week, being able to take those lists of projects that you continue to receive and forward to me and put it into a format that I could be better ready to present. I think one of the challenges is I've been getting a lot of emails to it, so I haven't really had time to necessarily sit down and put it into a format to present to the whole board. So continue to send them my direction, and then what I can do is I can be prepared depending on if you want to see it next week, I can get it ready for next Thursday and we can go over the specific list. The other update that I would just quickly add as well, I did register with the U.S. Treasury for this week. They did open the portal to where we could register and make our request for the funds. I did that on Monday, and it was, I think I shared with each of you, that was quite the experience getting set up through the U.S. Treasury and all their security protocols and getting signed in, but that was accomplished. And I just learned, that's another reason why I'm getting a lot of emails and distractions, that we did receive the first allocation of the ARPA funds. So that has already been released. So it was a pretty quick turnaround from the time of registering at the portal. And right now I'm working with both the treasurer and our finance manager, because right now with this amount of funds coming in, we're implementing plans because there's limits on how much we can have in our LGIP account. We're in the process of opening up a second one to hold these specific funds. And then also the treasurer's been very actively working on moving funds and making some investments as well to also free up some room in our account. So again, we haven't appropriated any of the funds in the current fiscal year. We do have that built into the approved budget effective July 1 to where those funds would be appropriated unless the board elects in the coming weeks to take some action to spend some of those funds in this current fiscal year. Then we would need to take some budgetary actions. But I just wanted to give that update that we're in receipt of the first allocation.
Great, thank you, Ken.
I
just wanted to give you an update if you don't mind too.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
So I sent to Ken my list, like kind of the shorthand list, and I can provide more details for when we do a presentation or when we discuss the whole list. I do want to note that one thing that I don't have a number on is that I'm visiting the Palmer Creek Water District irrigation dam tomorrow. And so then I'll have a number from them on a proposal to repair their dam too. So that's just one that's missing and I need to get into the spreadsheet.
Right, I've submitted a number as well, a number of sort of preliminary requests. The only thing is that in conversations with the cities, they haven't really gotten to the place where they've talked about specifics on a lot of these projects. We do have overall numbers, but trying to get an idea of where, what are they deficient in that we could perhaps help. So there's a lot of that still to be determined. But since we're not doing anything this fiscal year, I don't think there's any urgency other than we want to get some of these things funded. So thank you. And thank you, Ken. There's a lot of moving parts to this. So if we are all wrapped up on that, we can move on to the consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion, please.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. On to old business, we have none. Other business, item I, which is item I1, which is consideration of authorizing position authority for an addition of 1 FTE deputy sheriff for the NHTSA ODOT grant-funded impaired driving traffic safety enforcement deputy, and approval of a $35,000 general fund allocation increase in order to purchase a fully equipped vehicle to meet the in-kind match requirements. And I don't know if the sheriff is joining us, but maybe Ken, can you add anything to that, or Commissioner Kula?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to note that we should have had under old business a follow-up on the wildfire workshop, like details about what we do next. So I just want to put that out there. I can bring it up as we go to the very end of new business if you would prefer.
Well, I think we should address it now. Because we did say we were going to discuss it again this week. So we can go ahead and just sort of do a recap and next steps on that.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, let's do that after. We'll make that item. How about we make that item I4? Nope, 5. Nope. How about let's make it item I6, because the last time I tried to change the numbers around, I got a lot of trouble. Ken?
Well, I was just gonna, and maybe I misunderstood last week, but I thought there was consensus to proceed with it, because there is a 45-day public comment period. And I thought there was consensus to proceed with at least doing the noticing and then the requirement, and then the board would take formal action and make a decision on the proposal based on, we have a proposal, we would have it out, and we would do the notice, and it'd be open for 45 days. And then at the conclusion of that, any public comment received during that period, the board could review that comment, and then the board would take action on considering it immediately after that. And so then that would be kind of what the process was looking like. And if I misunderstood where we left things last week, my apologies.
No, you're one step ahead of us.
That sounds good to me, Chair, too.
That sounds good. Commissioner Berschauer, does that work?
That is my recollection, that we were going to start the timeline since there was some parameters around that. I guess the only thing new that's come forward in terms of the discussion around it is a clarification, or need to clarify that it is a voluntary program that farmers or people in rural areas would voluntarily participate. Because as you know, Commissioner Kula, being a farmer, some farmers are hesitant to have certain organizations come onto their property or, be involved in that way. So that was the only feedback I had received in terms of a clarification. I don't know if you can speak to that, but.
I think I probably could speak to that Chair, yeah.
Yes, perfect.
It's a series of, it's proposed 3 wildfire workshops. So it would be an invitation. It is an invitation to come to 3 specified locations to learn hands-on what to do on your property.
And I did hear from Sergeant Young. He took part in a meeting with the district and got some more information. And he was supportive of it. And again, it's going to be at various locations that people will then opt to go to. So it's not going to be on particular people's property unless they've agreed to it. So I felt a lot of measure of confidence hearing from Sergeant Young, and the more the merrier when it comes to these types of seminars. And there are a number of others that are going to be going on, and he's working on that. So maybe, thank you, Ken, for getting the timeline rolling, because there is a process there. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We don't have to address that. We can move on to going back to item I1. And if the sheriff isn't here, do we just need a motion then if no one has any further questions? Ken?
Yes, and I believe the sheriff was not available to join us this morning, and I was looking quickly through the list to see if maybe someone else from the sheriff's office. The only and the sheriff and I weren't able to connect this week. We've traded some voicemails and some emails trying to schedule a time to discuss, because I did have some questions on information that was provided in the memo, and as the it could just be terminology being used, but as the budget officer, when I see a request for increase of discretionary allocation, that creates the appearance that it's asking for the sheriff's office annual discretionary allocation be increased. The sheriff in one of the voicemails did clarify that he's not looking for an increase to his annual allocation of general fund monies, but he is requesting, there is a request for a one-time contribution to help pay for a vehicle to support this program. And it was I believe it was a $35,000 request. The other items that were requested as part of the memorandum that called for, they were wanting to move funds from one line item in their budget to another line item in their budget. That actually does not require an action by the board, because that's not, we're not adjusting the overall appropriations. We don't appropriate by the line item in a budget. They have an appropriation level that's set for all of 1043. And so it's when we record the actual expense, it'll be recorded to the correct line, even though it was budgeted in another line item below. We have the ability to do that. So, so I haven't had a chance to really, other than trading voicemails, but it's my understanding that the request is really for the $35,000 for the purchase of a vehicle.
Commissioner Burschauer? Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Chair. I did speak with the sheriff last Friday. He's out of town this week on a regional conference, but we did talk about this position. It is being funded in terms of the personnel. It's being funded by the ODOT grant for half of this year, which we're already through half of it, and then for the next 2 years, it's fully funded, and they expect that there will be continuing funding. The only part of it is that we don't have a vehicle that is specially equipped to handle this particular assignment, which is a DUI specific assignment. So the grant covers the technology that would go into the car, but they need the car. So I think it's roughly a $50,000 cost, and they're shifting some 15 internally, and then the ask is to round out with the 35. So this is specifically for the vehicle for that deputy to use.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Ken, just to clarify, it is or it isn't a general fund allocation?
It is, but it's a one-time, but the reason I wanted to clarify that, because it doesn't necessarily, we have several funds that are discretionary in nature, meaning that they're not restricted funds that we use to fund requests. So the ask is, if I understand it correctly, they're seeking $35,000 to purchase this vehicle, and we would have to if approved, we'd have to determine what's going to be the source if approved, whether that's going to be general fund at a 1002 or possibly ONC or landfill license reserve. Those are three that always come to mind that we have typically done limited awards or done one-time purchases or grants.
There's no way any of this would come under the cover of ARPA? Any stretch? Probably not, huh?
I mean, I could look at that, but I'm not sure. Because I don't believe this is in direct response or in connection with COVID.
Well, actually, the argument could be made since we've had an increase in drug overdoses and relapses, and people take a look at the liquor, the alcohol taxes that we're getting from OLCC. That's been increasing. So, and we know we've definitely got a DUI problem in this county, a significant number of traffic accidents that we've seen. So it might be worth looking into. And I know that it's a stretch, and I remember the last time with the distracted driving grant that they got, and they were actually looking for people who were texting and driving, and we had a lot of that the last couple of years, people getting into accidents because they were texting or on their phones, and that was really successful. So I would love to see this happen, but yeah, just be interesting to see where we take the money from. But maybe we come back next week or do we want to just go ahead and approve this or vote on it? Commissioner Berschauer?
Chair, I think it's worth looking into because I think the sheriff said that they would plant a vehicle now so that they could get rolling with it now, and then they'd have to eventually, backfill that vehicle when they need it. So I don't know if it's something that, we could draw out a little bit and see if it would qualify for ARPA and that way. But it didn't seem like it sounded, as per my notes from the sheriff, it sounded like they have something they could plant immediately and use it, but they would eventually need to backfill because they don't have vehicles for bodies. But I would agree. He said he's the uptick in DUI arrests during the day, broad daylight, 10 a.m. or 2 p.m., right in the middle of the afternoon, are on the rise. So this is definitely, but unfortunately, it's needed.
And you're still unmuted, but Chair, I was going to propose. Did you have anything to add, Ken, before I said? Okay. Good.
Was I muted? Sorry.
No, I heard you, but I saw Ken unmuted and I was like, oh, maybe he wanted to add something. Since this agenda item is both a request for additional discretionary and the position authority, I would feel comfortable with approving the position authority, and then we can come back to the vehicle if that's reasonable.
Well, wasn't the only consideration, thank you, Commissioner, the only question is where would the funding come from if we were to approve it? Wouldn't that pretty much be the next determination that our administrator would have to make? So I don't know that there would be any reason to hold it over other than to if we did agree to this, where would the funding come from? What fund?
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Chair.
So Commissioner Berschauer, do you want to move approval of this item?
Yes, I will move approval of item I1.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. On to item I2, discussion of an appointment to the Mid-Willamette Valley Area Commission on Transportation, or MWAC. Now, I know we talked about this back in April, and I believe that former Commissioner Primizic had resigned and sent a letter in, and that sort of spurred the conversation about a replacement for an appointment. And did we post it? I received a a letter of interest, an email of interest. So I don't know where we're at and whether or not there were any others.
I have not heard anything more from other people of interest. But I don't know if I didn't see it on our website, but maybe Ken.
Yes, this is one of those where we were in a holding pattern until we actually received the something official. We received the resignation letter as the chair described, and then we did receive something official from MWAC asking, for an appointment. So at this point, we haven't taken any action on posting the vacancy because we wanted to have the discussion with the board and see what type of process you wanted to follow for making an appointment to that position. So it's an open question. So we haven't, that's an open question before the board today on how you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Ken. So can we just go ahead and post that as a vacancy on the website with our others? And then we can go ahead and make note of that is a vacancy. And then we can just ask people to submit that basic application to us, or would they need to submit a specific application that is specific to MWAC?
I believe, if I remember correctly, this is an action by the board to appoint a representative to MWAC. So if we can post it on our committee page that we have a vacancy, how long would you like to have it open for? When would you like to have this come back before you to see the applications? Would be the next question, and we can make it happen.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Chair, let me real quick, while we're still on this topic, pull up when our next MWAC is, because it seems like it would be great to have them there if possible. So
Sorry, I think everyone just froze. Commissioner Starrett, if you were talking, can you repeat what you said? My screen froze.
Oh, sorry. No, just Commissioner Kula is looking up the next MWAC meeting. And also we had asked Ken if we could just post this on our website under vacancies. And now the question was how long we wanted to wait while we accepted applications. Commissioner Kula is looking up when the next MWAC meeting is.
And Chair, I should know this, so apologies that I don't. They're quarterly, so it's a gap.
Well, I think at this point we can just go ahead and make sure it's posted on the website and then receive applications. And then at the next meeting, either there's Ken, yes.
So Carrie just called me and advised that they had just met on May 6th. So if they meet quarterly, we still have a little bit of time.
Okay, well, then we would be able to at least leave that vacancy open for, what would you say, month or so? And then we'd have some time to look at applications and go from there. Okay, all right, that gives us a little bit of time. Commissioner Kula, does that sound good?
No, that sounds great. Last year's meeting of the same time frame was August 4th, so we do have some time.
Okay, and that will be here before you know it, so that'll give us some time. All right, thank you all for that discussion. Let's move on to item 3, which is consideration of extending the COVID-19 telecommuting policy per Board Order 20-104 to expire July 1st, 2021, or upon termination of the state of emergency declared by the Governor of Oregon, whichever comes first. And we've all been able to talk to, at least I feel comfortable getting more of an update from our administrator. So Ken, do you want to give us the sort of the landscape of where we are now and what this looks like, bringing this up to July 1st?
Correct. So there is a memorandum in the packet with this request. We are, as the county and a lot of our operations, we are still continuing to utilize teleworking policy to both ensure compliance with OSHA regulations and current guidelines that are in place, but it also helps us navigate facility limitations associated with that as well. I know there were a couple questions asking for updates on approximately how many employees we have using this. And we're not, and these numbers reflect both intermittent and total. I just wanted to get a total number. Right now, departments have reported back, we have about 223 employees, which represents about 40% of our full-time equivalents that we have working via telework, and it varies from department to department, even down to the position, because there's many positions that you can't do, and there's so many departments that they can't accommodate telework requests. So that's what we have right now as the statistic. I know there were some questions about that, so I reached out to department heads and got some information. So roughly 223 employees, roughly 40% are doing that. Again, the one thing, and I know I've shared this with each of you, and I apologize, I at times sound like a broken record on this. The one thing that I would emphasize is that what the teleworking policy does. The teleworking policy is not a mandate for offices to telework. Instead, the policy, because we do not have prior to the pandemic, we've never had a formal policy related to how we accommodate telework requests. And what this policy does is it creates the framework and process for each of those department heads and managers to facilitate the requests, because telecommuting was very new to Yamhill County. That we learned to adapt very early in March of 2020, when we had to adapt to that. But again, this policy creates the framework, and ultimately it's up to the department head and the manager to consider, both the position, the operational constraints, and also the needs of the employee. So this is a defined process on how an employee makes a request to their manager, how the manager considers a request, processes the request. And then it also has the caveat on should the operational situation change within a specific office, or the teleworking might, if it's not working, or there's just been a shift that we need to be, implementing those services in person in office. It does have signed agreements and everything in place that empowers the manager to make those decisions. And so again, I think it's, although we're transitioning and we're seeing things, but improving, at the same time, with a lot of the OHA guidance and the OSHA rules that are coming down, there are some challenges in being able to manage the risk and exposure associated with that. And this teleworking policy is another tool in the toolbox that enables us to continue to make sure that we're in compliance with those guidelines, and it empowers the managers to consider teleworking requests in a consistent manner that's subject to policy. And so that's why I'm asking to at least extend it to July 1st at this point.
Okay. Yeah, initially my first reaction was, at what point does this end? We've got these ongoing emergency declarations. I don't know how many times they've been renewed. And I, at what point is that going to end? But I think basically what we need to acknowledge is that administration and department heads are going to need to comply with the OSHA rules, which now have become, the temporary ones have become permanent. There's no end in sight for that. And that's really put a strain on some of the operational issues that we would have to deal with, or any employer would have to deal with. So thank you. Commissioners?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I support an extension of this policy. I do wonder about whether we would need to be, the commissioners would need to give the authority to county administrator to develop a permanent, like a real policy around working remotely for the future, right? Like it doesn't need to be tied to COVID because some effective work can be fully done remotely. And so it just seems like to create a level of flexibility in our own operations, especially when we have departments that are full, but they're physically full, but they might need an additional person. So I just wonder whether there's an opportunity there.
Thank you. And I wanted to just clarify with our administrator that there is flexibility that department heads do currently and have always had the authority and the discretion to use various accommodations for people. Is that pretty much right, that if somebody needed to work off-site that they did?
It's been very rarely used, I think, for the most part. I think, some of the challenges around, I think there may have been in isolated departments sometimes where they have had more informal agreements on specific situations. And my only hesitancy is that gets to be challenging on not only approving without a standing policy to follow, that it becomes challenging in not only considering and approving a request, but also in saying no, in denying a request, and having the basis and the process for how you consider those requests. I just throwing on my former HR hat, it's one of those times that not having a formal policy, you end up with inconsistencies in departments, and it just raises potential future disputes, and whether that's disputes between managers and employees on denials, but also between the county and the labor unions at times, because absent a permanent policy, it just creates some challenges. And historically, like I said, prior to March of 2020, teleworking was not something that was done on a regular basis within the county. I can think of one or two positions that I believe were in both cases may have been non-bargaining and in a smaller office. So it was very specific group of employees and where this was applied. And so I see some challenges. And if we were to, as Commissioner Kula mentioned, if there was direction from the board to come back with some kind of more of a permanent kind of policy around how we handle telework requests moving forward, there are some steps that we have to take that under the contract as far as any formal policies, because that's the other part that's unique about this, because the temporary policy that's before you was implemented as an emergency measure because of the declared emergencies. And so because of that, there's some items in the collective bargaining agreement that some steps that we did not have to go through because of the emergency nature on how the policy was implemented. So if we were to do more of a permanent policy, there's some steps that county council and I would have to do before that policy could go into effect.
Okay, sounds good. Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not opposed to, as Commissioner Kula has requested, perhaps setting up a permanent long-term structure of teleworking and how we would manage that. However, 40% of our FTE is teleworking right now. They weren't before COVID, prior to March of 2020. So we're not necessarily in normal times. What I would like to see, and I don't know if anyone knows when the governor extended her emergency order until. I don't have that date handy. Does anyone know?
I thought it was through June.
I think she just did it, but it was for 60 days. Maybe May, June. So I don't know if July 1st is consistent with her extension, her recent one. It's possible. And I agree with Commissioner Sterrett that we now have all of these new rules, OSHA rules that we have to comply with. My thing is I would like to see from departments a phase back in strategy. What is that going to look like? Because if she doesn't extend her emergency orders again, which she's indicated she's probably not going to do with the language that's coming out, I don't want to be in a position where the county doesn't know how we're going to phase folks back in. I think we need to be ready to do that, and there needs to be a plan put forward and ready to go, so that if she does not extend it, we shift into phasing back in, and there's a plan for every department, and it's been approved by Ken, and that's how we're going to get back. So I'm in favor of extending it through July 1st, but the caveat for me is I want to see some phase back in plans.
Ken, is that pretty much what we're seeing now, and what under your direction you've basically told department heads is get people back to work as you can?
Yes, we've been doing that. In fact, throughout the year, it hasn't been part of a formal, there hasn't necessarily been a formal plan. I think there's some offices and departments that have rolled out, because a lot of it is so operationally specific, and so we have seen a transition that we have been working on, because I will say, this time last year, we were closer to 60% were teleworking. And so we've started to work on that, but if the board wants to see or wants me to put together a report and connect with department heads and find out what their transition plans will look like, I can reach out to department heads and we can get something pulled together.
And Chair, if I might,
Yes.
I'm not trying to be unrealistic. I mean, it could be that certain departments just have physical constraints per the OSHA rules that they say, look, even if we wanted to come back, we couldn't because of it. So I'm not talking about an unrealistic plan. I just mean, I don't want to be caught flat-footed where the governor says, okay, we're out of an emergency, and then we've got departments saying, well, we're not ready. We should be ready to start. So that's what I.
Okay, great. So do we want to go ahead and approve the extension through July 1st? And I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the extension of the COVID teleworking policy through July 1st.
We have a motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion passes. Thank you.
If I may, Chair,
Yes.
because there was another topic that kind of came up during that discussion, and I just want to make sure if there was clear consensus, does the board want me to come back with another more permanent type teleworking policy? I just want to make sure that I'm clear if this is something I need to get with my HR team and county council to prepare something and bring back before you.
I am in support of that.
Yes.
I think that would be wise.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to make sure I got clear direction on how to proceed.
Want to give you something else for your to-do list. All right, we can move on to item 4. I4, which is consideration of requiring parental consent for vaccines administered to children under 18 at any county event. So we have a draft copy of a, I guess you would call it a resolution at this point. Commissioner Berschauer, did you want to bring us up to speed on this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the proposal is a resolution because we as a county, I don't believe an ordinance would be required if we are directing county public health to ask for parental guidance when they are administering specifically a COVID vaccination. So that was kind of understood before we put this together. That's why it's a resolution. The resolution really is focused on not only that recommendation, but it's focused on, some boosting informed consent in the language and the information that we provide to people who are receiving a COVID vaccination. These are recommendations county-wide, so not just regarding public health, but regarding private providers that are giving out vaccinations as well. So that's what the resolution is focused on. I believe, based on some conversations that have happened back and forth with Director Manfred, that this board is going to have to make a directive in terms of letting Ken know that we would like this to happen internally. But again, we don't have control over private providers. So this is something that is specific to county public health, and anything that we are involved in, whether it's a direct clinic of administering COVID vaccinations or it's something that we are co-sponsoring. So that's kind of the framework of how I'm bringing this forward.
Thank you. Kristen, did you want to weigh in on basically the form and formula here? This is proposed as a resolution, and yet we now have a couple of options before us, and also we have to consider the legal maneuvering or the legal consequences of breaking with an OHA contract necessarily, perhaps regarding ORSs.
Sure. So yeah, this is the draft document is a resolution. As it's currently drafted, it does make a number of recommendations to residents and recommends that they be provided certain information and that information be up to date. So in that sense, it's a recommendation and an encouragement to provide additional information to residents. So that would be appropriate. I think that element would be appropriate in the form of resolution. It's a non-binding sort of statement, a proclamation by the county. We're not actually enforcing any obligations or prohibiting any certain activity, or for that matter, requiring that any additional actions be taken. So to that extent, the first several items under the now therefore be it resolved portion of the resolution could stay as a resolution. If in fact what the board is interested in doing is providing direction purely internally to our public health department in the form of a county policy, then I don't believe you would need to adopt even a formal resolution. That would simply be a direction by the board to staff to implement that policy. That's similar to what I understand Lynn County did last week. I know there's been some confusion, some questions about what exactly Lynn County adopted. Was it an ordinance? Was it a resolution? Was it something else? My understanding from talking to their county council's office is they had a discussion with their board, and in the end, what they determined to do was provide some purely internal direction to their public health department. So again, if that's sort of where we're headed, I don't think we would need a resolution. Then the last two, be it further resolved items in the resolution, that's where I think we may need to have some further discussion around both of those. The second one in particular is an outward facing obligation that we would be placing on private practitioners and private providers, requiring them to provide patients with information from the following websites on immunity, for liability, and all legal remedies for any adverse events. And then it has a link to that website. The prior one, I think Commissioner Bershauer may have talked a little bit of this already. We would probably want to better clarify what we're saying when we're talking about a clinic that the county sponsors or co-sponsors. Director Manfred may be able to speak a little bit more to that, but to the extent either of those parts of this document remain, because they are outward facing, because they would be placing obligations on private providers, I think the only way we could do that would be through an ordinance. And again, unless an ordinance is adopted unanimously as an emergency ordinance, ordinance adoption requires 2 readings, at least 13 days apart, and then those ordinances don't go into effect for 90 days. So those outward facing aspects of this, we may need to talk a little bit more about, and then we can also have some further discussions on whether or not the board is trying to make some purely internal recommendations or policy decisions for our own public health department, or if you did still also want to make some recommendations and encouragement to others through those other elements of the resolution. We could have an internal policy, and then you could still have a resolution.
Thank you, Christian. Ken?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, I reached out and asked Director Manfred if she could join. So in case the board has questions, but I just, Lindsay's here in case you have questions. So I just wanted to, I reached out and asked her to join the meeting. So I hope it's okay with the board.
That's fine, because I reached out and asked her to join as well. So she got lots of invitations to this party. Well, thank you, Director.
I'm leaving myself out. Director Manfred, we'd love to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Christian, did you want to welcome Dr. Manfred as well?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay.
All right. So just a little bit of thank you for being here. A little bit of the backstory on this is after I had heard about what Lynn County had done, I had asked Dr. Manfred if I sent an email to her and copied our administrator, and with a request that we just ask for parental consent. This was something that was done on as a public record with a copy to our administrator, and Dr. Manfred responded that she had already gone ahead and done that. There didn't seem to be, and I had received no concerns or, follow up to that other than, yeah, we went ahead and did it and all is well. I didn't receive anything from the administrator or Dr. Manfred. So my request to her, many times, I will send an email to Dr. Manfred and I will say, hey, what's this and how do we fund this and how does all this work, as part of my questions on agenda items and various things. So this is not out of the ordinary. And do you want to just go ahead and respond to that? Because I know you were quick to respond back that yes, you had gone ahead and given instruction to staff to require informed consent.
Assuming that question's for me, and yes, I'm happy to respond. And I would say, yes, your accounting of that is accurate, but I think after that, of course, my concerns about the request really prompted me to notify you and another commissioner that really I intended to follow the consent laws as I understand them, unless compelled to do otherwise. And at this point, I really encourage the board to consider postponing any sort of decision until a thorough review can be done on the interpretation of this statute, which would include looking at any relevant case law about that. Otherwise, it really feels like I am being asked to do something that goes against Oregon statute.
I just for me, out of curiosity, this was not a concern when we initially corresponded. It was just sort of a foregone conclusion, and there weren't any concerns expressed at that time. I'm just wondering everybody knows the medical age of consent is 15. That's not, something you have to dig around to find. So I'm just wondering what changed in that time.
So certainly, I don't think I would say that my concerns changed. I think those have always been there, in addition to the law, but just in terms of also prohibiting youth who can legally consent to this, particularly youth that may not have access to parental guidance or guardianship, who want to access the vaccine, but our homeless youth, our youth that are couch surfing, things like that. So I just want to clarify, my concern has always been there related to the request. And I don't have much else to share with you other than I made a mistake. And I really worked hard to rectify that and make sure that my position on this was clear. And I hope that I've been able to do that.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Kula.
Oh, Ken looks like I will follow up after Ken, if that's okay, Chair.
All right, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, and the other part that I would just add to that how things, I'm not even sure how many meetings that we've had over the last 3 days on this specific topic, because understanding that we've been getting a lot of information, it sounds like there's a lot of competing interpretations on and it's my understanding that it still seems like this is still being discussed and possibly we're waiting for further guidance that may be coming out, because I do know that Lindsay and I have been having this discussion daily. I lost track on how many meetings that we've had this week again on talking about this, and working with Christian as well, and looking at the statutory language, looking at what's being requested. I think, some of it, we're looking for assistance, on the interpretation of the specific statute as it applies to these specific vaccines or how that applies. So there's some question marks, and I just wanted to just add and just to express, that my support, for Lindsay in what she's been navigating with this, and I appreciate the fact that the acknowledgement that she made about the initial decision, but that we've been having a flurry of discussions to try to find something definitive that on how this applies, and it seems like everything that has to do with interpretation or the time, I don't know who's doing a review of case law and some of these other things associated with this. I just wanted to just further support what Lindsay was saying, and just say that, in light of the recent change, we were having those discussions because we do have some concerns of with what we're seeing in the current statute and what we can apply at this point, but at the same time recognize that the board sets the policy and we implement those policies. So I just wanted to just briefly make that statement.
Thank you, Ken. Commissioner Kula?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ken. I support the recommendation of Director Manfred to postpone this until a thorough review can be done of its the legal application of it in our community.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burschauer.
Thank you, Chair. So we're not the only county that is doing this. Lynn County and now Marion County as well have given internal directives to their county health departments to require parental consent. And there was a legal advice, if you will, from Lynn County Council discussing how they had the power to do so. And I would just want to sort of take a step back for a minute and describe why this is coming forward and why it's a problem. We are hearing from massive amounts of parents, and unfortunately, I just checked my junk mail folder. I have a lot of public testimony that was sent to my junk mail folder. I'm so sorry. I will forward that to public testimony. If you don't see yours, it'll be on next week, because I didn't even realize that there was so much in there. But I'm a parent of 3 teenagers. This is a huge concern, and the concern is not that a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old has the power of medical consent in Oregon. It's that this particular vaccine is not FDA approved, and there is money coming to counties in order to promote vaccination of children. So that's why this is coming forward and why it's so important. I did reach out to several people on their interpretation of the statutes. One of them is the superintendent for my son, because this particular person is hearing as well, just like we are, from parents who are freaking out about their children being offered a vaccine that they don't approve of, whether it's at a county health clinic or it's on a school-based event. And I'd like to read what he said about it, because he has been pushing back on this as well. And I think it's important. And it says on the question of consent, ORS 109.650 states regarding disclosure without minor's consent and without liability. A hospital or physician, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, naturopathic physician, dentist, or optometrist described in ORS 109.640, and Christian, I can send this to you too, may advise a parent or legal guardian of a minor of the care, diagnosis, or treatment of the minor, or the need for any treatment of the minor without consent of the minor, and is not liable for advising the parent or legal guardian without consent of the minor. This section gives licensed medical dental practitioners immunity if they advise a parent of the care, diagnosis, or treatment of the minor, or the need for treatments without the minor's consent. The term need is paramount, as children ages 0 to 19 are statistically more at risk from death by flu or other diseases. Further, ORS 109.510 sets the age of full rights of citizenship, aka power to consent, at 18, which is why the statute had to be rewritten to allow for certain exceptions in which a minor can give consent. In the event a doctor involves the parent of a minor in a diagnosis and treatment plan or course, and the parent agrees but the minor refuses, the treatment can proceed per the parent and doctors prescribe or direct. Thus, there are checks and balances on the exceptions allowed for minors once the parent is involved. The intent of ORS 109 is to allow teens the option to seek and authorize treatment for an acquired sexually transmissible disease, chemical dependency, and basic treatment and care by a licensed medical dental practitioner. At this time, the legislation was drafted. Parents were viewed by the bill's supporters as an obstacle for treatment for teens, minor teens, due to the shame and impact of the reputation of the family. The bill was later revised to not require that the parent be forced to pay medical and dental care if they did not consent to the treatment. Finally, ORS 109 allows practitioners to involve the parent if, in their professional opinion, the need for treatment or the probability of a positive outcome of treatment would be enhanced via parental involvement and consent. ORS 109 does not give express permission for teens to consent to non-FDA or standard care treatments. In simple terms, it leaves the issue of consent for experimental treatments offered under an emergency authorization open to the expression of need. So I think this just comes back around to, we're dealing with, and this is not, this discussion is not centered around routine medical standard care. We're talking about a vaccination that came forward within literally the last few months, and it's not even FDA approved. And the soonest that's going to happen is at the end of maybe next year if it goes through. So this is something that's a special consideration. And I think given these circumstances, it does warrant having parental consent and guidance when we are dealing with children ages under 18, 15 to 17.
Thank you, Commissioner. One of the things that we've heard from so many people, I'm going to say it's probably been 50, 60, 75 to 1 in support of parental consent. So what we're saying here is that we're basically allowing for a child, a minor, to agree to an experimental biologic at this point that has basically, we're still in clinical trials. It has just recently been emergency use authorized for young people. We're seeing significant number of young people having these adverse events, and all you have to do is go check in the vaccine adverse event reporting system, which is on the CDC website. So my concern as well, and I've always advocated for informed consent for everyone, and I think you can remember this, Director Manfred, years ago at a Board of Health meeting, asking the Board of Health, will you get behind informed consent for all vaccinations? So in other words, before someone consents to a vaccine, let's take a look at the package insert. Let's take a look at the ingredients. I've got one here that talks about chimpanzee DNA, and that's in one of the vaccines. Fetal stem cells, that's in one of the vaccines. There's a whole host of other ingredients you wouldn't drink, much less inject into yourself, and we're asking a child to make these considerations, especially when there is not a high risk of fatality or significant illness in 99.9% of young people. So I think that it warrants us making the stand. I do believe we have some autonomy when it comes to the state. We've pushed back against the state. I'd like to think that we do make some decisions here based on our community, and we don't just walk in lockstep with Oregon Health Authority, which I have to say has absolutely handled this public health situation abysmally, not only with the information they have given us, the lack of information they've provided, the misinformation. When I was on a call, I believe Commissioner Cooley, you were on the same call, where I asked OHA Director Pat Allen, are these drugs FDA approved? And he said, yes, they are. Well, they're not. And just recently, they walked that back, saying we are currently in clinical trials and will be for another year or two. So we're the guinea pigs right now. It's one thing if a 21-year-old wants to accept these, and that's totally, I believe in medical freedom. But when we are going to incentivize or perhaps in some way encourage kids when they go to school or something to take a vaccine that's still in clinical trials, I think we have the autonomy and the responsibility to let parents know that they will get the cover of parental consent.
If I may, just a couple of things as you're thinking through your considerations that I think are important to note, particularly when I have read the language that is in the proposed resolution. I think some of the language can be a bit misleading, particularly around the clinical trials. I think there are, you're absolutely accurate that there are still ongoing clinical trials, but largely those clinical trials are looking at expanding things, like looking at different age ranges, assessing and understanding how the vaccines impact immunocompromised individuals, which we know they impact them differently. So in order to meet the FDA's emergency use authorization approval process, there has to be sufficient enough work done within that phase 3 clinical trial to get them there. And so in order to get that EUA or emergency use authorization, there has to be enough happening in the phase 3 clinical trial to make that so. That doesn't mean there aren't, again, ongoing clinical trials, and largely those clinical trials are really looking at the expansion of the vaccine, again, to people, like how it impacts immunocompromised or things like that. That is how I understand the FDA process to happen with these particular vaccines. And I think that it's just important to note that. I also think, just thinking about the VAERS system, which I think is a critical public health tool, and as the public health administrator in Yamhill County, with all of the vaccines that we give, whether it's COVID or another one, and with all of my relationships and work with our healthcare partners, I am always telling people, put anything that you think could even possibly be connected to a vaccine, even if you probably not, but maybe put it in there, because it's helpful, again, as a tool to collect that and see anything that might rise above it. I think it's also very misleading to look at the information from the CDC on the number of VAERS reports, because none of those None of those are verified, and none of those you cannot say that anything in that system is caused by a vaccine or even associated with a vaccine. It's a tool to collect that information to further evaluate. And so I think it's just important as we're thinking about utilizing that information in some way that we fully understand what it is and what it isn't.
Thank you for that. And I think it's important for us to let people know that this is actually, I've asked that we get this information out there. As of now, there are 48 reported COVID vaccine related deaths in Oregon, and there are 195,000 reported COVID vaccine related injuries nationwide. Now, getting into VAERS is one thing. We know it's going to take weeks before the investigations continue, but we're also seeing significant events having to do with women, with spontaneous abortions, with all kinds of issues related to reproductive health issues and the pregnant women. I mean, that statistic alone is very concerning. So what I'm saying is we could argue all day long. I think people should have the information. The Board of Health at the time would not agree to informed consent for all vaccines. And I think anytime you are withholding information or not being upfront in giving information, that is a red flag for me. When I receive something, I want to read the package insert. I want to know what I'm taking. When we deliberately make it a policy where we're not going to give that information out, I think that is of concern. But back to parental consent, the number of emails we've received have been, we really have received a lot of emails from parents who are saying, please, I want to know. This is not your normal standard care. Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer?
Thank you, Chair. Director Manfred, you said that in order to receive FDA approval, you have to have these trials, which I totally understand. But I think that, and anecdotally, I've been having conversations with people who have had the COVID vaccine. They don't realize that they are technically a trial subject. They don't wrap their minds around that because they think that because the government is handing this out, that it's okay. And if adults in their 50s don't understand that, 15-year-olds aren't going to understand that. And I think that, for me, it's just an extra check and balance in terms of the safety of children. I have family members who are EMTs, and they're saying that in California specifically, they're saying that their calls right now are, a large part of them are vaccine injuries. They're people who are having severe reactions after receiving the vaccine, from having blood clots to having large blisters all over their body. These are real events. These are real people that are being impacted by these vaccines. And it's not just the COVID vaccine. I'll be the first to admit that I had no idea. I have vaccinated my son with every vaccination that has been approved. I had no idea before House Bill 3063 came forward a few years ago, that this was such a concern of parents. My eyes have been opened, and I am not anti-vaccination. I have vaccinated my son. So for me, this is, and now I am married to a man who has children who have been vaccine injured. So this is a real issue, and it doesn't seem out of line or irresponsible to add another layer of safety for our children who are 15 to 17 years old, who cannot drive, they can't buy cigarettes, they can't buy alcohol, they cannot have sex with adults, they can't make these adult decisions, and yet we're asking them to comprehend that they are literally phase 3 trial subjects in a COVID vaccination experimental medical product that is seeking FDA approval in the next few years. I just think that is a huge leap for me. I have no problem with parents who choose to get their child vaccinated with a COVID vaccination. No problem, that's medical freedom. But I want the parents to have a seat at the table and be informed. And that's where I'm coming from on this resolution. And Christian, I would be in favor of striking those last two, be it resolved that the two that you said were outward facing, I would be in favor of striking those two and doing the resolution simply around the informed consent, but having an internal directive that from now on, if the county health department is going to administer COVID vaccinations, that there be a line on the form that says, here's your parental consent.
The last, right before the the second to last further resolved, Yamhill County recommends all persons electing to engage in the use of COVID vaccines are made aware of the complete list of adverse events compiled from each official record in VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And I don't think that's onerous, or I don't think that's unreasonable to recommend that people take a look at it. That's all we're saying is look at the information. And I'm a little suspect when you don't want people to take a look at the information. Lindsay?
Thank you, Commissioner Ferret. And I want to reiterate the fact that we do provide informed consent. And I am absolutely in agreement that informed consent is 100% necessary. And that happens throughout all facets of HHS, whether we're talking about vaccines in our clinic or we're talking about behavioral health services. Informed consent is absolutely critical, and I agree 100%. I think there are documents that are provided to people with the ingredients of the vaccine, with the potential side effects that they might experience, and all of those pieces. And so people are receiving this information. In addition to that, people are receiving and greatly encouraged to utilize the BSafe system. Everyone gets information on after they get their COVID vaccine, and encouragement to please use this system where they're able to in real time report any symptoms or side effects that they may have, whether that might be a sore arm or vomiting or whatever it might be, that goes into that and feeds into that system. And again, so that we can watch from a public health standpoint what might be happening and address anything. And you saw what happened when there were the handful of cases of blood clots, right? There was an immediate pause. That's the system working. That is people feeding into that system, and that's an example of the system working. And so that is in place and that is happening, and we encourage that. I think the challenge again with the VAERS system and providing that information is that it is not accurate information. There is no way that I can look at that information and say that any of these things are causal or related to the vaccine because it hasn't gone through that vetting process. Whereas when we look at the clinical trials, that's where that vetting process has been happening. And then it continues again through that VStat and VAERS system to be looked at so that we can find those things and that there can be those pauses like we saw with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine if needed. And so it's important for me to convey to all of you that informed consent is absolutely critical to me, and I believe that as well. And I think where there's a difference is what information should be included because of where we believe it's factual and relevant to the vaccine conversation and where it may not be.
Thank you, Director Manfrin. Commissioner Kula?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Manfrin. While I still support Director Manfrin's request that this be tabled until there is a more thorough discussion of the legal ramifications, since we are apparently going to continue having a discussion about it right now. I'll ask Christian, what are the legal ramifications? I appreciate that you have shared verbally with us, Commissioner Berschauer, the comments of a superintendent. I can follow those. I understand what they are trying to say. That to me isn't really it's not a legal opinion that I'm going to hold on to. I hope you can understand. But I would love to hear from Christian about this. And then I also want to hear from Director Manfrin about whether violating state statute will risk anything at public health.
Yeah, thank you for that. So obviously you've all got a lot of information over the last several days, just like we have, and we've been reviewing it and processing it and trying to make sense of it all. so that at least for me, in my perspective, I can try and give you the best advice I can based on the information that I have at the moment. To something Lindsay Manfred said earlier, I'm not aware of a lot of additional case law out there that has yet to be reviewed. Taking a look at the statutes, taking a look at the opinions that have come out, taking a look at the guidance, have taken a look at some of the opinions that have come out from legislative counsel, done a quick check of the annotations in the statute. I'm not sure that there are other relevant cases out there on point to still be reviewed. That's not to say that further review of this issue might not still be valuable. There is a lot to this question about, because this is a vaccine that is in emergency use authorization, does that create a different environment around whether or not that is the kind of decision that the legislature intended to allow minors to make when they put the age of consent into effect in 1971. I think that's a bit of an unanswered question. I'd like to hope that we'll get some additional clarification on that. I'm not sure that we will. But I can tell you that after having looked at the statute, looked at the opinions, reviewed the different information that I've been able to gather, I do think this is an open question, but I think a argument can be made that we as the local public health authority can make the decision to require parental consent for vaccinations to 16 and 17-year-olds based on what we have today, right? A large part of my analysis and I think the conclusion that Lynn County came to as well is based on the fact that at the moment we have some OHA guidance that also seems to support the position that providers can require parental consent if they're clear about it in their website, if they're clear about it in their information when they're allowing folks to make appointments. But that could change, right? In my entire practice, I'm not sure I've been asked to give advice on an issue that feels like we're walking on shifting sands more so than this one. There's a lot that could change today. There's a lot that could be changing as we speak. But given the fact that the statute itself is silent on what it is providers might decide to do around the issue of consent, and the current OHA guidance that implies and suggests that providers can still require this, it's my opinion at the moment that we would be within our authority to require that. That may change, right? If we get some different guidance from OHA, and if it's guidance similar to the kind of guidance that we received on the 18th, the interim guidance for fully vaccinated individuals that refers back to enforcement of that guidance pursuant to governor's executive orders, well, that guidance under those executive orders have the force of a public health law. So if we get that kind of clear and direct guidance from OHA, then I think we would have to take another look at, is our policy now in direct conflict with a public health law? At the moment, I'm not so sure that it is. If that guidance changes, I think we need to take another look at this issue. And then we're still left with the question of, are we really in uncharted territory because of the quote unquote experimental or emergency use authorization status for this vaccine? So that's the best advice I have for you at the moment. The board makes policy decisions like this all the time based on the best information that we have available. Sometimes those policy decisions are subject to a challenge. This situation is no different. I will acknowledge that there are some significant differences in opinion on this matter, but that's where I've landed at the moment.
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate that. We are in uncharted waters. We have been on every aspect of our lives for the past 14 months, and we have to make a decision we have to make a decision as a board. You know, you hear AOC, Association of Oregon Counties, talk about you've seen one county, you've seen one county in relation to the 36 counties in Oregon, and not all the counties and have the same culture, the same a political ideology or anything. They're not all the same. I was on a call with the governor where one of the chairs in the Eastern Oregon county said, you know, Governor, in Multnomah County, there's more trust in government than there is out here. So people are a little reluctant, perhaps, to take the vaccine. And we do have significant concerns about what's coming out of Salem in the governor's office. So I have to ask the question, what is the function of a county if not to make policy decisions that are different from the state? Why not cut out the counties, just have OHA make all of the rules, have the governor make all of the rules? We don't need commissioners. We can save an awful lot of money and basically just cut out the middleman. I think what the commissioners are is they fail-safe stopgap against things that they think might be harmful to their community. And that is what the function of the local public health authority is. And if not us, who? And yes, I do think we have the authority to put this overlay of protection on our in our community. Yes, Christian.
So just to try and clarify, and hopefully this helps. We do have, as the local public health authority, and the governing body of the local public health authority can adopt ordinances and rules necessary to carry out the duties of the local public health authority. And I'm reading now from ORS 431-415, but subsection 2, that statute also goes on to say, however, that the governing body of a local public health authority may not adopt an ordinance or rule or policy that is inconsistent with or less strict than another public health law of this state. So that's where I'm kind of referring back to, if we get different guidance from OHA that is released in the form of a public health law, as some of their prior guidance has been, we will need to reconsider what we're doing to ensure that it is not inconsistent with that public health law. So there are those sort of sideboards on that. And perhaps the argument can still be made that, again, because of the unique nature of the vaccine and its approval status, that it is different than your regular forms of medical treatment.
Thank you, Christian. Commissioner Kula.
Just as a reminder, I just want to go back to, I had 2 questions, and I want to make sure that I get the next one answered from Director Manfred, which is, what are the legal ramifications or the relationship ramifications, which correspond to contractual relationships with the Oregon Health Authority by doing something that could or could not go against state statute? It's a pretty short state statute.
I think I would look to Christian for some of this, but I think really it's going to come down to the determination of the upstanding of that statute and what that means and the interpretation of that. And if we get further guidance from a regulatory body like OHA or another body that indicates more clarification around some of the ambiguity that we find ourselves in now. And I think that we would be at risk for a number of things contractually if we were to sort of blatantly disregard any of that sort of direction that may come to us.
And I would agree with that, Casey, just to sort of follow up on Lindsay's sort of difference to me. I'm reading from current OHA guidance that providers administering, and this is from May 11th, it was still on OHA's website this morning. Providers administering COVID-19 vaccinations to 15 to 17-year-olds should make it clear on their website, print materials, and at the time a vaccine appointment is made, whether consent from a parent or guardian is required and whether a parent or guardian must be present at the vaccination appointment. So as of today, the guidance from the OHA, I don't believe when we are instituting this policy would be in conflict with the current guidance from the OHA. So I don't know that we would have a contractual problem at the moment.
So to follow up,
I'll also say that this guidance, the recommendation in the preceding paragraph says that OHA recommends that eligible locations not require consent from a parent or guardian to vaccinate someone age 15, 16, or 17. So there are recommendations in there, but there are also acknowledgements that the local providers do still have some discretion to exercise. So that's part of the confusion here, is that we don't have real clear guidance to operate under. If we got clearer guidance that made it, more clear that our policy could be in violation of a public health law, then I think we have to think further about the concerns that you mentioned and the concerns that Lindsay addressed. Because yes, we would want to make sure that we're not risking additional funding or violating the terms of any of our state agreements.
okay. So follow up, if I may, Chair.
Yes,
So a question for Christian then, and then a question for Director Manfred, and I will remember. So Christian, the informal opinion from Legislative Council noted that FAQs are not considered a legal document. Would you agree? And was that from the FAQ?
So yeah, the information I'm getting is from the FAQ.
Okay. And
but
then
Legislative Council opinion is also not a public health law. It's an opinion, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we are. That's why I'm talking about the shifting sands. We've got a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions, and really what would be most helpful would be specific information and specific guidance, which we don't
and
have.
so my follow-up question then for Director Manfred is, if the board directed you through Ken to inquire with the OHA specifically about this question, what do you think the turnaround time on something like that would be?
I have inquired, and at this point in time, the response I got is they are currently analyzing the information without a timeline given to me, although I have heard anecdotally that they are working to create a guidance document to come out that would provide more clarification. Again, no timeline.
Good questions. Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. Christian, does an OHA guideline supersede Oregon statute?
Well, see, that's the question, right? It depends on the way in which the guidance is issued. So again, referring back to that interim guidance for fully vaccinated individuals that came out on the 18th, it says to the extent this guidance requires compliance with certain provisions, it's enforceable as specified in Executive Order number 2066, paragraph 10. And if you go to that, it talks about OHA guidance having the effect of public health law. So I think it equates to statute at that point, pursuant to the governor's executive authority and her emergency authority.
Right, but the statute doesn't say anything about minors consenting to experimental medical products, including vaccinations.
Correct, but it also doesn't say
right
that it's not something they can do. It's silent.
But it also provides for parental consent as an option if the need is found to be there by the provider, whether it be a warning or whether it be a hey, we really think this is a good idea for your 15-year-old. It could go both ways. It could be a positive or a negative. So it provides for the need and some discretion there if the provider believes there's a need to inform.
Correct. You're right. You're absolutely right. Under 109-650, that's up to the provider to determine whether or not to inform the parent.
My next question is for Director Manfred. Have you signed any sort of agreement, intergovernmental IGA or contract or whatever, that says that the county is going to actively promote vaccinations and administer vaccinations to children as young as 12?
So any document or IGA that I have signed have been ones that have come before the board. So there's nothing that I have done that you haven't seen before and has been approved by the board. Certainly there is language in some of those IGAs that talks about promoting vaccine and encouraging vaccine, working with local community-based organizations and healthcare providers and things of that nature in there. There is language related to, I don't know what the language actually reads in the IGAs, but there have been some interpretations provided that state some incentives can be used with those funds. However, I shared this with Commissioner Sterrett, and I'm certainly comfortable sharing it with the rest of you, that I have concerns about any sort of monetary incentivizing of vaccine, whether we're talking about youth or adults alike. I don't want to ever be in a position where it feels like we are being coercive, particularly to marginalized populations. That you know, $100 gift card could mean a lot, and I don't want to be in a position of using that that to convince someone, so to speak, to do something they might not otherwise. So while I believe in these vaccines, I think they're safe, I think they're effective, I encourage people to use them. I am making it our public health mission to assure that there is easy access for this vaccine to anyone in our county that wants it. I also feel very strongly that we should not be doing anything that could be deemed coercive.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That is the ethical viewpoint. I think the opposite is the unethical viewpoint, but and you certainly have support from commissioners on that. I just, at this time, I don't feel like there is, you know, this push is an active one. We are facing money coming in from the state. We're being asked to sign contracts for money that is intended to incentivize children being vaccinated. And it's frustrating as a parent because I certainly do not, I'm not going to stand in the way of anyone choosing to be vaccinated for COVID, but clearly there was an expectation of the adult population being vaccinated at a certain level, and that did not happen. People are simply choosing not to. And a lot of the feedback you will see in public testimony that was submitted is from people who plan on getting the vaccine. They are not anti-vaccine, they will get it, but they want to wait because they want more time to pass to feel comfortable. So I have a problem with this sudden shift to 17 to 12-year-olds getting vaccinated, because it seems a lot like we're trying to boost the numbers just to reopen, which is this arbitrary percentage that the governor has placed on the state of Oregon. So with that in mind, and hearing from Christian that there is currently nothing in state statute that governs minors and their decisions around experimental products or treatments. And given that other counties are making this move, and superintendents are getting an incredible pushback from parents just in fear that their children are going to be bombarded with this when they go to school in the fall. I think it is absolutely worth having that additional check and balance as a safety precaution for our children under 18 to inform their parents of what's going on. Their parents could very well decide that, hey, this sounds like a great thing, we want to have you vaccinated, but they could also have a concern that they might not otherwise have been made aware of. And so I'm in favor of proceeding with requiring parental consent for anything county related.
And one of the things in the discussion of what is the definition of county related, because I asked Director Manfred, where do the vaccines come from? Well, they come from the state, they go to the county, and then they go to various providers. So I think we have to be really clear on whether or not we're trying to give directives to external organizations other than county specific sponsored events. And that is where I think that we probably would err on the side of discretion in just keeping it in that, and not, while I'd love to be able to say to providers, hey, you just need parents to sign off on this. I think that we are probably in uncharted waters there as well. And I would say make it county sponsored, in other words, from our public health clinic. And that's my recommendation. Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back. I'm sorry, I recognize your comment, and then I'm going to go back to something. So apologies for going backwards, as it were. But Director Manfred, do vaccinations, are vaccinations considered medical care? Because the language in the statute is medical care. That's all it says, medical care.
Yes, it is, and it's specifically called out in the guidance document from OHA that vaccinations are included as part of the medical care definition.
Okay, great. So if there wasn't clarity around whether this vaccine is medical care, vaccines in general are medical care.
Thank you. I think there could also be some discussion as to whether or not this comes under the definition of vaccine, since it is a new medical tech, a biologic that is a new technology that typically has not been used before. And I'm sure Commissioner Kula, you've looked into the makeup of these vaccines, knowing that they are totally different mechanism than vaccines we've known in the past. So
Director,
what I'm going,
I'm sorry, Chair, if I may then address that, is that Johnson & Johnson is an adenovirus. This is a very common virus carrier. So just to clarify that is
just that one.
Very familiar to many researchers over the years. But you did say all of them, and so I wanted to clarify. Admittedly, that one is not permitted or is not emergency use authorized for people 12 to 17.
Right, and interestingly enough, although it is under the category of traditional vaccines, it's also the one that we've seen the most documented adverse events, and most of them have occurred in women. So I think that there is ample concern for us to take a look at these biologics, whether or not they are authentic and orthodox vaccines or whether they are experimental biologics. But I think that being the, yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Oh, I just want to make sure I was in the queue. You were still speaking.
All right, so I just want to say at this point, I'm going to call for the question, and since there is that gray area, I want to say that I think that we do have the authority and we do have the discretion to ask that anything that the county does would include, in this specific instance, that parental consent be part of the process for youth. And so striking those last two, be it further resolved, I'd like to suggest that we pass this resolution and awaiting further guidance, although I certainly don't think the Oregon Health Authority has had a really good track record with the information that's come out of there. It's been really abysmal to try to get anything out of them that is even resembling in terms of timeliness and also in terms of veracity. It's been a real challenge.
And I just want to clarify, Chair, that the document, that the resolution that I have at least has two resolves. One of them is an outward facing and one of them is for county staff. So if you're striking both two resolves, there wouldn't be any resolution.
Yes,
is that what you were going to say?
The last one.
Sorry, Chair, if I might, I want to strike them both and have a separate vote on an internal directive so that, we are voting on our internal directive to Ken, which is then passed down to Director Manfred, that we are going to require parental consent. And then a motion for a resolution on, as amended, striking those last two pieces.
So the resolution really deals with more informed consent, and the directive has to do with parental consent. So as I stated, those last two would be struck. The resolution, would there be a motion for the resolution? So I would call the question on that, and then we would make the next item, which would be a directive for our administrator to give direction to our Health and Human Services Director to do this internal policy of parental Christian.
Sorry, Commissioner Kula, if you want to go ahead and go, if you've got.
My question was just that if forgive me, I thought we were talking about policy. I didn't realize we were talking about policy and resolution. So I would be happy to share my own thoughts on the resolution if you're willing to entertain them.
Sure, go ahead.
Which what I would suggest is that since there's no resolve, it would be good to have a resolve. Do you agree that if we're striking two resolves, then there is no resolution, it's just a statement? But if you're willing to have a resolve in there, I would encourage us to add one that says, given all this, we encourage you to consider taking the vaccine.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
Okay.
in favor of that. We certainly don't want to encourage people to do anything. It needs to be their choice. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. And Christian's waving his hands too, but I think there is a sufficient now therefore be it resolved, and there's quite a few paragraphs underneath it. So I think if we do just strike out the last two be it further resolved paragraphs, it stands and makes sense. I would also, well, maybe I should just make a motion, but I would also move that we fix the title, because the title includes the direct.
Right. And I would agree. If we strike the last two, there is still a now therefore be it resolved prior to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recommendations. That would be what remain part of the resolution. I did also want to, at the risk of more sort of disagreement over this, I did want to just make sure that when Ken and Director Manfred and I were talking yesterday, to try and make sure that if there is, and we talked a little bit about the VAERS database, but if there is any other specific statements that are being made in this resolution that Director Manfred has concerns about in terms of accuracy or whether or not they're correct, that we have a chance to talk about those. And maybe we already have, Lindsay, and I'm not asking you to say more than you already have. I just want to make sure that before we move to adopt this document as drafted, that we've had a chance for everyone to review it and be comfortable with what it says.
Just one clarification is that the vaccine at the VAERS system is directly, it is on the CDC website, and that is oftentimes what we cite, CDC and a variety of other websites. So I don't think that it is unreasonable to put the CDC information in this. We're not asking people to go to some other website other than what we normally cite as guidance for some of these public health policies. Commissioner Berschauer?
Thank you, Chair. So I want to be clear. So I'm going to make a motion because I want to be clear about what we're talking about. So I move that we approve the resolution, and I will read the title, the amended title, in the matter of a resolution recommending vaccine-informed consent guidance and striking the rest.
Yep, that was the amended title I was working off of.
Also, as amended, every reference to where it says minors age 17 and under, I think it should be simplified to 18 or under 18, excuse me, under 18. So every reference would be under 18. Also, as amended, strike the last two, be it further resolved, that statements. So that is my motion with those three amended pieces.
Commissioner, clarification on the under 18 that you've asked us to change from 8 with children age 17 and younger. So how does that square with us removing the this text in the original resolution title?
Chair, because the rest of the title will be stricken from the resolution. So the title, the amended title, is simply in the matter of a resolution recommending vaccine-informed consent guidance. since we are making a consideration about the internal directive separately. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm just wondering about so whereas all parents and guardians with children under 18 have definitive rights to know detailed information to satisfy the being informed before granting their consent. I just want to make sure that we're clear what this resolution does as compared to what a directive might do, the two.
So the motion that stands is to amend this particular resolution in 3 ways. One is to change the title to simply read, in the matter of a resolution recommending vaccine-informed consent guidance. The second amendment is to go through the document and change the references where it says age 17 and younger. I think we just need to simplify that to say under 18, because there were some questions of, well, does that mean 17 and a half? Doesn't apply, or, you know, so I want to simplify that. So just read under 18.
Okay.
And then we strike the last 2, be it further resolves, because we are considering that separately now.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Appreciate that. Commissioner Kula, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just recall that there was a question from Christian directed at Director Manfrin, and we never get the opportunity to hear from her.
What was that question again? Sorry. Lindsay Manfrin, were you waiting to respond? Because I don't remember the question.
I believe, if I'm correct, Christian had just noted and was wondering if there was further conversation related to the VAERS data and how that relates to what we're seeing. And I would just add, you know, similar to what I said earlier, is providing the VAERS data. Certainly that can happen, but I think even the website itself notes that this information does not mean that a healthcare personnel or vaccine caused or contributed to the adverse event reported. So we're really providing information that isn't necessarily attributed or can be attributed to the vaccine. So that would be my statement.
Oh, I would just add that if that's noted on the website, then we don't have to worry about any kind of qualifier, because we're not saying if you go to this website, you're going to see all of the acknowledged and the proven cases of any adverse event. If by directing people to the website, we're saying you can see there clearly that it makes that note that that have not been necessarily and 100% attributed to, these are just reported.
Sure. And would just, oh, sorry. I was just going to note that the way that it's written right now does not direct us to direct people to the website. It appears that we would need to be doing data polls regularly to provide information. So it would be helpful to get some clarification, whether that's in the resolution or the document, or if that is something that we would further vet Ken and myself on the best process. I'd be happy to do it that way as well.
And that's been an ongoing discussion about the VAERS data and asking if we could share that. I know I contacted the governor's office and I asked Leah Horner where the data was coming from, and she said that they don't have that data. I think when I emailed you, Director Manfrin, you said the state had it. The state said that they're just going by the CDCs. So while we would have to pull that, right, but I get that. I mean, I can see that. So I'm sure it's available, because I've got the Oregon deaths and the nationwide injuries. So and the injuries in Oregon. So they're available. We can just give that to people or put it on our website so people know that it's there.
Yeah, I believe we actually have information about VAERS on our website already related to vaccines. As I said, we really encourage anyone who even thinks that there may be some contributing factor of a vaccine for any adverse event, big or small. We encourage people to complete that for all vaccines.
Right, but I'm just saying that as far as sharing the information, the Oregon specific information that we pull, in addition to the other information that we put out in terms of case counts and positivity, things like that, that this would be information that we share on our website, the Oregon specific information about VAERS.
that is something I can request our epidemiologist review. Again, it takes capacity and staff time, and would need to look for direction on what you're looking for exactly, versus the link to this website for folks to look around at.
That would be great. Yeah, I think this is important for people to know to make informed consent. Thank you for that. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. And I think Commissioner Kula or Christian also had their hands up, but is there another avenue to report adverse events for the COVID vaccination? Is there another official avenue to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So unlike other vaccines, COVID has a far more intense process for the ability to be able to, and by intense, I mean widely available process. So before, you'd have to go either contact your health care provider and resubmit a VAERS on your behalf, or you go to the CDC website and do that. Right now, because COVID has some uniqueness to it, and there were questions about that, and just the continued value on safety. There's a program called VStat, and every single person who comes to any clinic that gets a vaccine, whether it's a county clinic or somewhere else, they're required to get information about this. So they receive verbal information as well as a handout, and encouraging people to sign up for it. And what that system does is it sends you regular text to say, hey, so it's proactive rather than just a person having to go and say, oh, I'm going to go report into this. It actually prompts people, hey, how are you doing? Have you had any symptoms? And it does that for a significant period of time, several weeks. I see Ken nodding his head like, yes, still getting those messages. So I think, that is an added layer of safety, checks and balances that is in place for COVID that has not been in place for other vaccines.
Okay, thank you. And that's great. And I think the resolution is it's not meant to be all inclusive and very specific. I think it's simply the way I read it and drafted it was, this is a recommendation that, that informed consent should include all of this information. So however providers want to do that, however the county chooses to do that, whether you hand someone something with a website on it or whatever, this is what we're recommending, a more robust, disclosure of this information.
Okay, so Christian, go ahead. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I just want to sort of remind everyone, as a resolution, it's a non-binding declaration by the county. The way it reads now, we have a number of recommendations, but they're not actually, as I would read it, requiring anyone to do anything specifically. If you would like to provide some additional instruction to public health around additional information for informed consent, perhaps consider that as part of your next discussion on the policy directive. But just clarifying that the resolution here now is simply recommendation and not actually instruction.
Thank you. Yes, and that was Commissioner Bershauer's suggestion. So do you? And
then we'll just make sure that in its final form, it reflects what our standard resolution documents reflect when we prepare that final draft.
Great, thank you. So Commissioner Bershauer, do you want to make a motion?
I did.
You did make. We got
Further
sidetracked.
discussion.
We got sidetracked. Ken.
And I apologize. I think it would be helpful, and I know it's a challenge, but I think in the interest of making sure that we have it clearly reflected in the record, and because we've kind of deviated into some other areas, I think it would be great if we could restate the motion with the changes that are being made to the resolution. So then that way we can just ensure that we're capturing that fully for the record.
And that's consistent with our past practice when it comes to reading resolutions into the record as well.
So Chair, do you want me to actually read it?
So is that necessary to read the actual resolution or just the title as amended and also the other amendments that were made? Kristen.
Our past practice has been to read the entire resolution, but I believe it is up to the board to determine whether or not they would like to read the resolution as amended in its entirety or by title only.
All right, I think it would be important for us to read the resolution just because there have been a number of changes. So without those last two, I think it's significantly shorter. Commissioner Bershauer?
All righty, here we go. In the Board of Commissioners of the State of Oregon for the County of Yamhill, sitting for the transaction of county business in the matter of a resolution recommending vaccine-informed consent guidance. The Board of Commissioners of Yamhill County, Oregon sat for the transaction of county business in combined informal formal session on May 20th, 2021 at 10 a.m. in a virtual meeting via Zoom, Commissioners Mary Sterrett, Lindsay Bershauer, and Casey Kula being present. The duly elected Board of County Commissioners of Yamhill County, Oregon find and declare, whereas informed consent applies to all vaccines used under Emergency Use Authorization, EUA, or Food and Drug Administration, FDA licensure, and informed consent laws exist to protect human use of medical products still within ongoing clinical trial. And whereas all persons electing to engage in the use of medical products still within ongoing clinical trials have definitive rights to know detailed information in order to satisfy the legal tenets of being informed before granting their consent. And whereas all parents and or guardians in Yamhill County, Oregon with children under 18 have definitive rights to know detailed information regarding the use of medical products still within ongoing clinical trials on their children in order to satisfy the legal tenets of being informed before granting their consent. And whereas all existing COVID vaccines are confirmed by the National Institutes of Health, NIH, to still be in phase 3 of ongoing clinical trials. And whereas all existing COVID vaccines are EUA approved only and not yet licensed by the FDA. And whereas all existing COVID vaccines cannot be officially FDA licensed until the conclusion of said phase 3 clinical trials, once long-term safety and efficacy data has been collected and submitted for analytical review by the FDA. And whereas all COVID vaccines will be in clinical trial until October 27th, 2022 at the earliest, according to the NIH. And whereas the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness PrEP Act protects all vaccine manufacturers from liability should their products still in clinical trial injure or be the cause of death for anyone electing to use their products without being officially entered into the clinical trial. And whereas all persons electing to engage in the use of medical products still in ongoing clinical trial have the right to be informed of known and unknown risks, as well as the right to refuse any medical products still in experimental phases of development and evaluation. And whereas SARS-CoV-2 vaccine manufacturers and the entire chain from production, distribution to administration have been granted immunity from liability for adverse events. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners recommends as follows. Yamhill County recommends that all residents of the county be provided up-to-date information from the Federal Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, VAERS, regarding number of deaths following administration of any of the COVID vaccines. And Yamhill County recommends that all residents of the county be provided up-to-date information from VAERS regarding number of injuries following administration of any of the COVID vaccines. And Yamhill County recommends that all residents of the county be provided up-to-date information from VAERS regarding number of deaths and injuries by age demographic. And Yamhill County recommends that all healthcare providers are aware of the signs of COVID vaccine injuries reported. And Yamhill County recommends that all persons electing to engage in the use of COVID vaccines still in ongoing clinical trial are made aware of the complete list of adverse events compiled from each official record in VAERS prior to administration of any COVID vaccine, so the county resident can report any adverse events to their healthcare provider should they occur.
Thank you for that. So we have a motion to approve the resolution as written. Do we have further discussion?
Chair, I would just say that I think that we should include the addition of an encouragement while we're recommending things that we recommend that people consider talking to their medical provider about getting the vaccine. And I recognize that you have expressed that you do not want to encourage that or include that, but that's what I'm asking.
Thank you for that. So we have a motion to approve the resolution. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Let the record show Commissioner Sterrett and Burschauer voted for the resolution recommending vaccine-informed consent, and Commissioner Kula voted nay. All right, thank you very much. And Director Manfred, if you can stick around, we've got another COVID-related resolution. I don't know that this one is as specific, probably not. Yes, Commissioner Kula.
I'm sorry, Chair. I don't believe that we addressed number 2 or like item B in this agenda item.
The direction to staff. Thank you. Commissioner Burschauer?
Thank you, Chair. Christian, what does that come in the form of? Is that just a straight up vote?
It can be. The board does not need to take formal action on this if your direction to staff is that this is the policy choice that you would like the county to be making, but you certainly can take a vote on that if you choose to, but it's not in the form of a resolution, or I guess what it would fall into would be a board order, but only in the sense that you would be approving a policy. For example, when the board has approved policies in the past, they've come to you and the board has been asked to approve the policy, and then that gets a board order assigned to it. So that's I thinking it through. I think that's what would happen here.
Okay, Chair, I would move approval. I think we should vote just based on the significance of this and making sure that we really are the ones who are making this decision and directing staff to do so. It's not Director Manfred who's making the decision, it's us. And so I want to make sure that's clear.
Thank you. Commissioner Kula?
I just want to note that Ken was trying very vigorously to say something earlier, but it looks like he's good.
The direction you're going is what I was going to recommend.
That's what I thought. So my only other comment is that I think that it's my view based upon listening to all of you, listening to county council, listening to Director Manfred, and the things that I've read in the record and from other legal opinions, that this is directly contravenes state law around the requirement for parental consent. And I don't think it's a good idea until we can hear from the Oregon Health Authority. And just to go back to a comment that Commissioner Sterrett made, the Oregon Health Authority regularly communicates with us about things, and we have to trust what they're saying when they provide either a legal opinion or a law, right? We work with them every day, and we get money from them to do the work that we do. So it's concerning to me. I don't think that we should. I believe that we are rushing into this, and I want to just go back to that. I recommend the suggestion and the ask of Director Manfred that we put this off until we have more clarity.
Thank you, Commissioner. And the other thing I want to add is, yes, we do. We get regular communications from the Oregon Health Authority. But if you have ever tried to get specific information from them, I can promise you, if you ask the hard questions, you will either get no answer or you'll get an answer that obfuscates. And I've been trying for months to get information. So we get their narrative. But when commissioners across the state, and I've heard from them, are asking for basic clarification, basic science, basic data points, basic rationale for these continued executive orders, we get none of the information we're asking for. I've made repeated requests and I've gotten no answer. So when you say that we have to trust the Oregon Health Authority, I can tell you that unequivocally, I do not trust the Oregon Health Authority, nor do a number of commissioners across this state who tried to get information. And so that is not where I get my marching orders from. It's basically from basic medical ethics or basic ethics around public policy.
In this case, I appreciate that, Chair, but in this case, we have a state statute that suggests or says, well, it says that a minor has the ability to consent on their own. It lies within it the implicit that if a provider is providing vaccinations to anybody within this group, that they cannot require parental consent. I'm just going to go back to that. This is just a question of a legal question. It's not a question of which metric are you using to enforce this thing. And I totally am with you that it is incredibly frustrating to get these shifting numbers or not get the number, the data point that you really need to know in order for us to run policy discussions. But in this case, we're asking for a legal opinion from them, an interpretation of their own, the statute that governs this work. And you have been told by Director Manfred that they are working on it right now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bershaw.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Kula, I would agree that it's about as clear as mud in terms of what the intent was for this statute. However, the statute's pretty simple, and there is no explicit language that governs experimental medical products. And I do think that this is, when there's an opportunity to protect parental rights, I'm going to take the opportunity. Heaven help those who stand in the way of a parent trying to protect their children. So I do think this is a necessity for us to do. I also think it's urgent because there is a tremendous push right now from the state and OHA to let's get these kids vaxxed before the end of June so that we can reopen the state of Oregon. And so there is no better time than now to stand up and protect parental rights and protect our children from making truly informed decisions, not being rushed into something or perhaps coerced, given that there's a significant amount of money, $25 million, in fact, that is being linked to this effort. So I move that we have a internal policy direction that governs the COVID vaccination clinics that our public health department is conducting, and or any event that we sponsor or co-sponsor that we require parental consent for a COVID vaccination for a minor under the age of 18. I would also add to that we make sure that our materials that are being given in terms of informed consent do include what we just discussed, which is potential adverse events or reactions, and any sort of documented ones that Director Manfred feels is worth sharing, whether it's from VAERS or from the VSTAT program or whatever. I would add that I believe that those materials should go forward prior to a vaccination occurring, whether it's a minor or an adult.
That would need some clarification on the actual specifics of what you're asking to be presented. There's all kinds of information out there. Some of it's I don't know. I think we have to be a little bit more narrow on what we're asking. Lindsay Manfred?
Yeah, I would just volunteer that I would be happy to send a packet to everyone of what is included already. There are several pages of information, again, including potential side effects, as well as ingredients and things of that nature. So if that would be helpful, I would be happy to share.
That would be great. Yeah, I would be interested in seeing that, and just to make sure that people get the comprehensive look at, not just the side effect that says you'll get a sore arm, but the other ones that have occurred. I mean, the whole broad, the gamut. So we
The
have
material I received had a very extensive list of common symptoms.
Okay, the common symptoms, what about those that are not common, but for instance, in the J&J case, we looked at people who had blood clots and some significant, those are included.
That warning is in there now.
It is now. Okay, great. Okay, good. So we have a motion to direct, to request that our county administrator direct our Health and Human Services Director to include parental consent for COVID vaccines for under 18, or are you saying under 17 and under?
Chair, the same language we included in the resolution, so under 18.
Under 18. Okay, so we have a motion. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Let the record show Commissioners Bershauer and Starrett voted for parental consent for vaccines under 18 in county-sponsored events. Commissioner Kula voted no. And thank you, Lindsay Manfrin. I appreciate you're in a difficult position. I know this is a sort of a push and pull, and I understand that it's been contentious. So thank you for your demeanor and your patience and working with us as we try to get through this whole very, very controversial issue. So thank you. It's been a long haul for you over the last 14 months. All righty, so we now have, and I think we're good with that. If you want to, you can stay with us, certainly. I'm sure it's been a chunk out of your day, but we are going to be also making having a discussion on the vaccine passports. So does everybody want to take a 5-minute break before we come back for that, or is everybody good to continue?
I need to fill up my water, Chair.
Okay, so then we'll just take a 5-minute break and come back and resume our discussion at item 5. I think everybody just left the building. They're like, yeah, I'm done with this. You two figure it out. That'll be
You know,
fun,
we
huh?
do have a quorum.
Yeah, we do
But
have
we
a
don't have
quorum.
legal counsel. I can't see that part of the screen.
Yeah, we do. We're good. We're good to
I'll
go.
log back off if you like.
No. Hey, listen. Every once in a while, we like to drag you into the melee. Okay, it looks like even Carrie Hinton and Carolina Rook are just about no rest for the weary, huh? Okay, so at this time we'll come back into formal informal session May 20th, 2021, and this is a continuation. We're on item I-5, which is the consideration of prohibiting vaccination passports. And now that this information has been coming fast and furious. We heard from the governor's office that basically it was going to be up to businesses to figure this out. Now they're being, businesses are now going to be put in the position of being enforcers, as are churches, which will be an interesting contest. But I'm bringing this forward because this was always, to me, what it looked like the end game was going to come down to. And anytime you ask people for information that identifies private medical information in order to just go about their daily lives, I think this is just another, it's a segregation, and I think we all are clear that segregation is not something that we want to continue. So I'm going to suggest that we prohibit the verification of any kind of medical information in order to gain entrance into, a county business, a county office. I know that there are two considerations here that county council has talked about is what can you do when, again, that outward facing, what can you do in telling a business what they can and cannot do? But then again, what is policy when it comes to requiring vaccine status for a county employee? So could you make the distinction for us and where we come down on this?
Sure. Similar to the conversation that we just had, if we're going to be placing prohibitions or placing obligations on citizens or businesses or entities in the form of a local law, that would need to be adopted through an ordinance. If we're simply making a non-binding proclamation or statement of support, that would be a resolution, or we could. The board could direct staff in the form of a internal policy to take certain action. So, and again, an ordinance that's non-unanimous and not adopted as an emergency would need to be read 2 readings, at least 13 days apart, and then would go into effect 90 days after that.
Yes, Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. Trying to figure out how to formulate this because I think that a vaccine passport is a very slippery slope and also just very challenging to do in a manner that protects everybody's privacy. So get that out of the way. I have serious concerns about prohibiting making essentially a local law prohibiting businesses from doing things. And so I would strongly encourage us to either scale it back internally or really work on this document. And as it stands, the language in it is not something that I would support, which is frustrating to me because I do want us to have at least a statement to the community plus an internal or consider an internal policy.
Appreciate that. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with the feedback from the community that we've received. There's quite a bit of testimony and was submitted. I think it's quite strategic. That's a nice word, strategic, that the governor has essentially washed her hands of these obligations and sent it back onto and put it on the backs of our businesses. And it's not just the enforcement mechanism that they're dealing with. They're dealing with now the OSHA requirements that if you mandate a COVID vaccination as an employer, you are also responsible for any adverse events that occur with those vaccinations legally, meaning it's a workplace injury. The overreach and the burdens that this action puts on our businesses, I mean, it's indescribable, and it's coming at us very fast and furious. And it's not just business owners. This is coming from people who are simply saying, you can't do this. You can't violate my medical privacy by asking me to disclose something prior to walking through your door. Now, whether a business has the legal right to do it or not, I think is irrelevant. It's just flat out wrong. It's immoral. And unfortunately, I think the real world impact is going to be a lot like we're seeing, like we saw with the Enchanted Forest that tried to open, and it was chaos, and there were threats, and people, basically they had to shut down. They couldn't open. It put them in an untenable position. And unfortunately, I think either that occurs, or we're going to start to see what we are seeing now and being suggested in New York, which is segregated dining for people who have had the vaccination versus people who have not. And I don't know about you, but I feel like we just took a flying leap several decades. This is un-American. It's not right. And I think that if we can do whatever we need to do to protect our local businesses from this egregious, horrible decision of the governors, we do it. This is not right.
Thank you, Commissioner. I wanted to read from the Oregon Constitution, the one that we all took an oath to uphold. And it says in Article 1, Section 20, under equality of privileges and immunities of citizens, no law shall be passed granting to any citizen or class of citizens privileges or immunities which upon the same terms do not equally belong to all citizens. That to me is huge. I mean, that to me says it all right there. And the other one is the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, that basically we should not be deprived of. That's Amendment 5. But Article 4, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, and papers. We fought a war over this. And these are not to be lightly abridged. So I think that at some point, somebody's going to have to push back. And why not Yamhill County? We're saying, oh, well, we can't because the state has the purse strings and the state has that golden cord wrapped around our wrapped around our neck. But I think at some point, those public comments where people are begging us, please do something if you possibly can. Please protect us from this. And I met with a business owner, a local business owner who's expanding a business here in town, who says, I don't want to be in a position to be standing at the door, having my staff stand at the door, asking people basically your papers, please. He said, I don't want to do it, but I consulted with an attorney who said that I have to do it. So we're seeing, we've seen businesses shut down and close down because they just can't do it anymore. I think we do whatever we can to protect them. And I don't know where this will lead in terms of, can you tell a business that they can't be checking people's status? I think that we've got the authority right here. Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. Can you elaborate a little bit on you think we have the authority to tell a business what to do? Because that's the part that I have a great deal of concern about, is us, one, whether we have the power, and two, whether we should be telling businesses what to do. And I also want to note that there are a lot of other gatherings that are subject to the OHA's guidance than just businesses. And so I'm curious about that thought too.
Yes, I think we do we have the authority to tell a restaurant that they can't have raw chicken dripping on the salad bar? Do we have the authority to tell a business you can't keep someone out who's in a wheelchair? Do we have the authority under a number of different jurisdictions to tell a business that you can't say to somebody who is of a different race, you can't come into our business? This is discrimination and it's segregation, and either one of those two things shouldn't fly.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, should we be telling businesses what to do as a Board of Commissioners?
Well, we're telling them what to do de facto with some of the rules and regulations where they're being told you can't discriminate against a disabled person. I mean, we've got laws that protect people from discrimination. So when we took an oath to uphold and defend both of these documents, it meant that was our job to stand in the gap. And we're standing in the gap now saying, yeah, these are two things this is my vaccine passport right here, and this is my vaccine passport right here. And no, I don't need to show you my papers. And yeah, I think we do have the right to tell people that.
So, but I guess, Chair, I feel like you're making a logical leap to prohibiting businesses from doing something, when what you are saying is that we all have inherently those rights that you have specifically talked about. So are you concerned about, your concern is that businesses are discriminated against customers. And so you want to prohibit businesses from discriminating against customers. Is that how you're saying it?
What I'm saying is, in no wise would we stand by and allow a local business to tell people of a different race, you can't come in here. The same way we would tell a business, you in no wise can tell someone that they can't come in based on a medical segregation policy that might come down from the governor's office, but it's not constitutional.
Chair, we've talked about this before, that we don't get to decide what's constitutional, right? Or what, I mean, Christian can clarify this, but I just have a great deal of concern about us in our role as commissioners here, prohibiting businesses from doing something, especially when they're under such stress right now. I'd also love to hear from you your thoughts about churches, about civic organizations, about city governments and their buildings.
Well, churches, if you look at the quote unquote guidance, they're basically telling churches, it came out in the Faith Initiative, came out and said that you have to have somebody standing there at the door checking vaccine status for people who choose not to wear masks. And I think that it's a little disingenuous, because you know that the governor lost a lawsuit that had to do with churches and faith institutions. But if you look really closely in the guidance, those are recommendations, because she knows she can't mandate them anymore per the lawsuit. Now you're seeing directives to faith-based organizations as to how they're going to operate within their buildings. I think that's going to be a challenge. And I think there's already one in the works right now in terms of a lawsuit. I think this is the whole vaccine passport thing is headed to the Supreme Court. But right now, we do tell, for instance, we make decisions on a regular basis about what businesses can and cannot operate in different zones. What I'm saying is that our job, why bother standing up when we're sworn in and swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Oregon if we're not going to do it when push comes to shove?
So back to my question then, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Berschauer, I just want to make sure that I get mine out. Thank you for your patience. So Chair, are you proposing to extend this to all places of gathering? And I would ask that to include social gatherings. And this is very concerning to me. I do not want to be prohibiting people from doing things in their homes, in their churches.
What I'm saying is you can't discriminate against people, and you can't require people to give you personal medical information in order to, go into a store or go into a church. We've got laws that protect from discrimination. Now, if you want to say to somebody who's coming into your house, I need to see your the latest report from your colonoscopy, well, then have at it. But I don't think that we should allow that type of discrimination to go on, in our community, and especially not when we're dealing with county offices and county services.
So to clarify then, Chair, are you intending to extend this to all gatherings that are other than social?
What I would say is that we don't have the right to tell people that they can ask for personal medical information in any venue. I mean, you can, it's discrimination.
Okay, so right now we have a draft ordinance that says businesses in Yamhill County, and then it says the county, and it says all political subdivisions thereof. And I'm not sure if that includes cities, special districts, school districts. But I'm curious, are you proposing to extend this ordinance and its language to all gatherings in Yamhill County?
Well, I think what the ordinance says, or what the resolution says, is that people can't ask for personal medical information to gain entrance to, to what is normally considered a public or a normal society. Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. I guess my framework for this is a little bit different. I see it as a protection for our businesses and employers, and for just constituents who are not business owners, but rather than a directive, because I think the real world application of this and what's going to happen is that you are going to see the pushback, the immediate pushback and defense being placed onto businesses. And that's by design from the governor, frankly. She doesn't seem to care either. So you're going to see the lawsuits directed at a particular business. You're going to see internal complaints by employees directed at the employer. So that's the real world application of this and why it's so destructive. So my frame of reference and what I'm using to consider this is really as a means of protection, because let's face it, this is headed up to the Supreme Court. This is entirely, it's the antithesis of what it means to be an American. I mean, this is just, it's so unconstitutional. And so everything that we're doing now, I feel, is more of a protection. It is a proactive layer for our businesses and employers, because the chaos that's about to ensue is inevitable. And I want to make sure that we are communicating to our folks here in the county that we do not support discrimination like this. We do not support segregation. We won't stand for it. And however that shakes out legally is how it shakes out. But that message needs to be very clear that it's not going to be tolerated either.
By prohibiting businesses specifically from doing something.
Or prohibiting them from discrimination. Yes, I think we do that,
But just businesses, Commissioner Bershauer, or do you want to extend it to everything? And this is really concerning to me if you're just singling out businesses for this.
Well, Commissioner Kula, I think maybe Christian can, because I'm thinking of parallels between the Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance, where we don't actually have jurisdiction over special districts or cities or whatever. Maybe that doesn't apply here, but I'm looking for some clarification on that.
Ken?
Yeah, and if I may, because I have some questions, because looking at the document as proposed in the ordinance, and specifically the item that stands out to me is I'm looking at subsection 3 that talks about prohibiting basing employment, and then how that relates to 4 with county agencies working to ensure businesses are in compliance with that. There's certain, I have questions around jurisdiction and kind of for something like this, the thoughts on, what divisions of the county we're looking at as far as compliance, because when you're looking at employment practices and employment law, there's various venues and jurisdiction, whether that's BOLI, EEOC, a variety of depending on the nature of the rule or complaint or that employment law where someone's bringing a complaint forward. A lot of those areas are not a role that the county has played a part in. If someone has if a business is dealing with an employee who has an overtime complaint, they usually don't come to the county with something like that. And so I just have some questions, and maybe, Christian has some thoughts or along the same lines as far as jurisdiction and what the board's envisioning as far as the county agencies.
Yes, those are good questions. Thank you, Ken. Christian, I know we've
So,
talked about this.
Yeah, I can hopefully try and clarify one aspect of this. Under ORS 203040, except by the consent of a city, a county adopted ordinance would not apply within the incorporated city unless it's the exercise of the police power.
And Chair, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Okay, is the Chair Starrett referenced raw chicken juice as an example? Is that because we are inspecting restaurants and food service for licensure all over the county, is that a particular one? Sorry, my phone is ringing, it's distracting. Is that a particular one that's the state? So even though the county is doing it,
that's our enforcement of a state law that we're doing pursuant to an agreement that we have with the state to monitor and enforce those laws.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so we go back to, and this does just harken back to the Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance, the whole concerns about enforcement and that whole thing, and I look at items 4, and how do you, as a county body, elected governing body, how do you enforce items 3 and 4 and 2, other than to say that is not a requirement that you show? So it goes beyond, this is not a requirement to show proof of vaccination. It is now a prohibition. So you know what, if you come into the county, it's not going to be something that's going to be a requirement. Christian?
And unlike the conversation we just had about consent, I think an ordinance along those lines would be in direct violation of current state and possibly some federal laws. So we're back to a similar discussion and concern around preemption, similar to what we have in the Second Amendment ordinance. And I also want to make sure that this is understood. If we adopt ordinances that are in conflict with state law, we run the risk of, in the event of a claim, not having insurance coverage. So that's something to keep in mind as well. CIS could deny the claim, and then we would be left to defend against that on our own. I just want to make sure that that is out there.
Is this a law? So are we looking at, basically we are sort of contravening a law that says you have to check vaccine status? Is that a law?
But there is the, again, back to the guidance that came out on the 18th that states specifically that to the extent it requires compliance with certain provisions, it's enforceable pursuant to an executive order, paragraph 10, which says that this guidance has the effect of, it is a public health law. So again, it's the governor under her emergency authority via the state agency, and the guidance is similar to, it is considered a public health law pursuant to that emergency authority. So that's, so right now in this guidance, what we have is, we have, all businesses, employers, and faith institutions are required to do essentially one of two things: continue to apply and enforce mask and face covering guidance, unless they have a policy for checking for proof of vaccination status of individuals. So that is something that businesses today are allowed to do under this guidance, which has the effect of a public health law. So if we were to adopt an ordinance that is contrary to that, we would be in direct conflict.
So, Chair, we are in the untenable position of having to protect our residents from a unilateral decision to create laws under emergency authorization and threat that are unconstitutional. So I'm struggling with this. I mean, I get Commissioner Kula's concerns at the technical legal language, but this is unprecedented, and
But as
unfortunately,
Commissioner Kula said, if I could, we don't via ordinance determine what is constitutional or not. That is the role of the courts. And I expect this will be challenged, and I expect that there will be some lawsuits that come out of this, and that's where they will play out, and that's where, frankly, I believe they should play out.
Christian, yes, Commissioner Kula in a second. I just want to say, so Christian, can you, maybe from the legal standpoint, in terms of historically, what is the function of a commissioner, county commissioner, taking the oath of office where you swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Oregon? What does that actually practically translate to for us as elected officials?
Well, I mean, that's a big question. It would oblige you not to take actions that would be seen as either violating both of those. But again, there are lots of ways in which the role and the authority within the framework of the state and federal constitution, commissioners are limited in. Commissioners can address issues of county concern, but the issues of county concern that we might choose to address, or the commissioners might choose to address, are also subject to these other legal tenets around, preemption, and around, the existence of prevailing state or federal laws that might limit what we effectively can do at a local level. I don't know if that helps answer your question or not, but
yeah, I'm just trying to get to the uphold and defend part of that, because that to me is, the primary reason, other than county functions and things like that, that the primary reason you have elected officials who swear to do both those things. What does it mean to defend? So I see this action as a defense of Article 4 and Section 20 of Article 1 in the Oregon Constitution. I see that as a defense. And if this is not ever an example of when it's appropriate to defend, I don't know what is. The wolf is not at the door. The wolf is inside the house.
oh, and again, I'm not suggesting that you can't take this action, but I think you need to be advised that if you do take this action and it is in direct conflict with state law, then, and we are challenged, and we do end up being sued or in litigation over this, we may not have insurance coverage, and we would be defending it on our own, which is fine. We will do that. I just wanted to make sure that had been made clear.
Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer?
thank you, Chair. I would add too that we are not agents of the state of Oregon either, but if we pass this, would that give us standing if a group of counties decided they wanted to sue the state of Oregon over this? Would that give us standing, or does it not matter?
So I guess I need to think a little bit more about that.
Okay.
And again, keep in mind that if and I know you know this, but a non-unanimous ordinance wouldn't take effect for 90 days. And we could be in a very different place 90 days from now. So that standing would have to, if that would give us standing, that would not occur until after the ordinance was in effect. It wouldn't surprise me if we see some pushback and some litigation in another county or another city prior to that. I'd have to think about whether or not we would have standing absent specific action, and I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kula?
That was my follow-up question, was outside of passing an ordinance, would we have standing? I mean, I'm not a lawyer and you all know that, but it sure seems like we have standing by virtue of having many, or 108,000 people plus everybody who visits being the subject. But I do want to, the draft ordinance has many things that are problematic to me. I think you understand that. And so I'm struggling with where what to propose for a path forward, because it sounds like we're all agreed that the proposal to put proof of vaccination on businesses is untenable, and that having some kind of digital thing is an invasion, or it seems at least to all of us to be an invasion of people's privacy. I don't see a prohibition on businesses being allowed to do this as the path forward to that. And with the exclusion of many other entities that are subject to the mask or proof guidance, this is a deeply flawed, in my view, ordinance that I would really encourage us to not approve. But again, I'm looking for a path forward, and I can tell that Commissioner Sterrett is too.
No, I was just, I think that anytime you're looking at something that has this many challenges that will inevitably come, that it will be flawed. I mean, we've seen that with any of the things that we choose to do. There are flaws because they're all going to be basically up for grabs in terms of a legal challenge, and so many of them. And I don't know how you get one that's bulletproof, to be honest, short of saying that, I mean, how do you take something where you've got a state directive and say, we're going to push back on that and have it bulletproof? I don't think there's such a document exists. I'd be really anxious to hear how you would edit this so that it would be less, it would be more conducive to fewer challenges.
I do not think that we should approve this ordinance in any form, is the basis of it. And if you are willing to look at other venues for pushing back, for asserting our legal rights, then I am open to that. But I don't think we should be telling individuals when they have a wedding gathering in a park what to do. I don't think we should be telling cities what they should be doing. And frankly, I don't think we can legally.
So that's not what this does. So what would those other venues be for us to get any kind of satisfaction out of the governor's office? Because for 14 months, I've not seen anybody get anything. There's been sort of that monoculture in Salem, and it hasn't included the rest of society. So what else could we do? I'm open to that.
Yes, I mean, Chair, the venues that I'm aware of are legislative and the courts, right? But us imposing a law that people really aren't so.
So legislatively, we can just effectively admit that that's going to get us nowhere, because the legislature we've got a supermajority, and they're not pushing back on the governor, and they even denied allowing themselves to have any kind of a voice in the continuation of these executive orders and these emergency declarations. So they basically have abdicated all of the power as elected officials to the governor, so we can just forget any kind of legislative fix. I think we've all tried that. And the other part is that if you want to talk about the courts, let's be honest here. The courts are, those who are on the bench have been loath to oppose the governor's orders. We've seen a number of those challenges in the state. I was actually part of a suit in federal court. And we know that we're not going to likely get a judicial fix. So we've got those two branches and the executive branch, and the fix is in. So really the object of the game is that local pushback is really going to be where we see any movement, because nothing has happened and it's not happening. I'd love to say that the legislature is going to be, ride to the rescue and be our champions, and they haven't been.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I believe that Commissioner Bershauer and Christian both suggested that this likely will go to the court, specifically the requiring proof. Or requiring people to just show their papers, as you've said. Maybe Commissioner Bershauer, did you say that? Or maybe you just suggested that it was?
I think it's likely it may face a challenge similar to the other challenges that have been brought against the governor's other executive orders and guidance. And those have, as Commissioner Stern said, that's been a mixed bag. Their authority's been upheld in some instances, and in others, especially as it relates to faith institutions, it hasn't. So that is the system in which we operate, right? We have the various branches, and they have their authority, and as do we. And it's frustrating. I appreciate that.
Chair, I think legal challenge is inevitable. My position is that what's our job then as commissioners? Because we know this is coming. We know our businesses are going to bear the brunt of these legal challenges, whether it come from somebody who walks into a restaurant and is asked to show their vaccine passport and threatens to sue the business, or it comes from an employer who now has employees that are threatening to sue the company because they're being asked to show their vaccine passport. So what is our job? I mean, is our job to just let the chaos ensue and destroy our local economy? Or is our job to stand up and take the fight to the state of Oregon or whoever it might be and work to protect our businesses? Because this is inevitable. Oregonians and Americans are not going to tolerate this. And it frustrates me to no end that no other state, with the exception of perhaps New York, is doing this. No other state is doing this to this level. And she has completely shut the legislature out. The people I elected to represent me on a statewide level, she has shut them out of the conversation. So I have no representation. The people who live in this county have no representation on a statewide level. She is single-handedly making these decisions. So what's our job? If not to protect the businesses and the local economy and the residents who live here. I'm not okay with simply washing my hands of this and saying, I'm just going to sit back and watch chaos ensue and watch it take down our local economy. It's not right.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I like Commissioner Koo. That's a good one. Sorry. Commissioner Bershauer, I really appreciate hearing that. I do want to note that I think our legislators might differ from you in the perspective of not having representation in Salem. And so I just want to acknowledge that we have, if I'm going to miss them, I apologize, but we have Gomberg and Anderson, we have Neerman and Boquist and Noble and Post and Thatcher, and we still have a little bit of Booth, Weber, and a little bit of Johnson. And so we have a lot of legislators. I understand what you mean that in this particular narrow part, but you said we don't have representation in Salem, and I think that that's not true. In this case, however, I would like to note that businesses and other entities that are subject to the new mask guidance, mask, not mask guidance, can continue to have a mask policy that requires everybody to wear a mask in their space. Now, I know that that's super unpleasant, but that is an option so as to not trigger the show me your papers, now I'm suing you back and forth. But currently, as written, this ordinance just targets, and I say targets because it has their name on it, it targets businesses in Yamhill County. And again, I don't even know what that means because there's a lot of businesses that do business in Yamhill County. Christian.
And again, just a reminder, it wouldn't apply in the incorporated cities without their consent. So we're talking about businesses that operate in the county outside of an incorporated city.
And then again, it would be up to the constituents within those incorporated areas to go to their local jurisdictions and say, we would like some protections as well. We can only do what we can do.
And that may be one, you know, in thinking about different ways to approach this, that may be something that the commissioners could do is short of adopting a county ordinance that would have limited applicability within the cities, go to the representatives of those cities and encourage them to take some action that could apply within their own jurisdiction.
And we can certainly do that as well. But every time we come down to making a difficult decision, we say, well, we can't do it because the state's not going to pay us. And we can't do it because we might get sued. And at the end of the day, everything comes down to is whether we can defend and uphold people's rights based on whether they're going to pull funding because we made a deal with the devil. Commissioner Berschauer?
Chair, exactly. And I have people saying, then why did we elect you? What are you doing if you're not fighting to protect us and to protect our constitutional liberties? Why did we elect you? What's your purpose? What are you doing? And Commissioner Kula, I would say in response, I think you know what I meant. It wasn't literal, but we do not have representation. And I would argue that many of the legislators that do represent Yamhill County have voiced significant concern over the lack of involvement of the legislature in making these types of emergency orders and decisions that she's making. So that is what I meant. And, you know, we had this discussion, it's harkening back to the SASO discussion. At the end of the day, this is why people elect us. This is what we are supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be challenging things that violate individual liberties and rights. We are supposed to be questioning. We are supposed to be pushing the boundaries, because if we don't, then we are simply operating as agents of the state, and that is not what we are. And I am happy to take that fight to our cities and say, please pass this vaccine passport ban and follow our lead. I would be happy to do so. I'd also be very happy to inform those city residents that we are doing so that they can influence their city councils. But my feeling is that we have not seen the initial impact of what this is actually going to mean yet, but it's coming very quickly in terms of legal challenges. And I am simply not comfortable having our businesses, be fed to the lions, if you will, and just sitting back and watching what happens. I think we know what's going to happen, and I think we have a duty to stand up and protect them. And I don't see this ordinance as being prohibitive on businesses in a technical sense. I think it's actually protecting them in a way, because they can come back and say, wait a minute, my county commissioners don't agree with you when you're coming after me. And ultimately, it might mean that we join a fight, but I think this is a necessary first step to protect our folks who live here.
Ken?
I just wanted to, because based on the conversation, and I just wanted to share, I'm just looking at it from an operational perspective on if something like this, based on the way the language is written, and I fall back to the original about, because there is language in here that's prohibiting businesses from, you know, these multiple things, and there's agents, you know, there's a compliance component to it. And if we're going to prohibit businesses from doing something, I'm trying to understand where we're going to seek and gain compliance to that. You know, what is that enforcement looking like? You know, and I'm just trying to struggle and have some understanding, because I don't know if this is something, this is, you know, we have code compliance that deals with our county code, and then we have the sheriff's office. And so we have some, you know, we do have some enforcement and compliance areas within the county. I'm trying to figure out or understand on how the way it's currently written, because it does say it's prohibiting businesses from doing something. And so I'm just trying to understand that. It's probably more of a question.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a wonderful question, and we've dealt with this before with the SASO. But what pops into my mind is that when public health gets a call, like they did that restaurant in Lafayette or in Carlton, that in February people were outside smoking without masks, and they called public health. Our public health went out there at 9:45 at night and issued them a citation for grown adults standing outside smoking without masks. And we issued them a citation.
And Chair, do you have more information on that? I'm not familiar with this situation.
Yeah, I've got it right. I've kept a copy of the citation, and it's been an ongoing discussion with Director Manfrin and our administrator. I was contacted by the business owner, and it was really disturbing. But wow, you know, if we can run out in February on a Saturday night at 10 o'clock at night because people are smoking outside without masks, there you go. I do have that, and I can send it to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My understanding, at least the thing I'm hearing and what County Administrator is asking is, what's the penalty and who enforces? Because right now it doesn't have any of that in there.
Right.
And are we allocating more resources, more money and staff time to this?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was a question for you, Chair.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I don't have an answer other than to say that when in carrying out prohibitions, again, like for instance, when the governor's order was to mask up and keep social distance, we were, as the county, enforcing that in a manner of speaking, even though it was a warning. It was just a warning letter. So we have to make provisions for how we're going to address this, or do we just say it doesn't really have the full effect of the law, and there is no enforcement to it? And at what point does it become a resolution and not an ordinance, which wouldn't pass unanimously apparently anyway? So those are questions. And when Christian and I talked, we knew that this was, which is why it's so prominently stamped draft, because there's so many things in here that, in fact, there was a concern about even putting it on the website, because it is really in its infancy. There have to be we have to go through it and try to figure out how we're going to make this palatable. But no, this is significantly a working document, and Christian and I knew that going into it. Christian?
Okay, that's really good to know. Thank you, Chair.
I've heard the Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance discussion mentioned a couple of times, and I think it's important to also remind everyone that one of the ways that we threaded that needle is to make the ordinance prospective. It didn't apply to existing gun and firearm regulations, so we avoided a direct conflict in doing that. We could find ourselves in that same conflict upon the passage of a new state or federal regulation, but that was one way that we sort of, after lengthy discussions, kind of came up with a ordinance that wasn't in direct conflict, and you know, that's something to consider maybe as we're talking about this going forward. I have concerns about the extent to which this ordinance would already be in conflict with what I understand at least to be the equivalent of state law.
Thank you, Ken.
And if I'm remembering correctly, again, to kind of build off, because I know there was some references to the SASO as well, that was really a prohibition on our staff from enforcing, where this one is saying that outside entities are prohibited, and the way it's written, it looks like we have an enforcement option for that, if that's violated. That was the other thing that kind of stood out to me if we're looking at the two.
And speaking of enforcement, as drafted, the ordinance doesn't have any enforcement mechanism. So that's certainly something that would need to be discussed, considered, and addressed.
Right, Commissioner Bersh. Thank you, Kristen. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. So let's play the scenario out. Somebody, tries to go to a restaurant and is asked at the door to show proof of COVID vaccination, and they decline, and they don't want to sit in segregated seating that would imply that they haven't been vaccinated or be forced to wear a mask. So what is the immediate reaction? Who do you call? Do you call OSHA? Do you call the sheriff? Do you call the local police department? I mean, I think that, I sort of already see the damage being done here. There's this false choice of, you either walk into this nightmare or you have this nightmare option. It's sort of, the damage has been done. So I guess I'm unclear as to the enforcement mechanism as well, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to fall onto our laps anyway. So we have a looming problem. It may not be tangible on the ground at this very second, but it is coming. And so what are we going to do ultimately to protect our folks? And I would say this applies to county employees as well, because many of them have been reaching out to us saying, look, this violates my medical privacy. You guys are not going to ask me for my passport. We also have employees saying, I cannot sit at a desk for 8 hours anymore with a face diaper on. I can't do it. And there's stanchions on either side of me, and I shouldn't be forced to be doing this. So we're going to be facing this problem as an employer on a basic level anyway. I just feel like, this is the time to make some decisions.
I would recommend, thank you, Commissioner. Christian, I know we talked about the variety of different pitfalls in the way this is crafted, and we already took out a couple of things that were just basically not going to work. I know that this actually, an ordinance like this has been passed in Lander County, Nevada, and what they basically said to the state was, we're not going to take any of your money, and you're not coming into our county to do any enforcement. And they said, if you do give us money, we're going to use it to pay the fines that you issue to the businesses that you find in violation of Governor Sisolak's decrees. And the state left them alone. Now, I don't think that would happen here. I think there would be some punitive actions. We've already seen punitive actions in our county, which just defy anything that I could ever imagine happening. Be happy to share those offline or even in a public meeting with some businesses. But I'm wondering, the next step would be, Christian, if we sat down, you and I, or maybe just came up with a revised version of this that we could bring back before the board that would have fewer of the enforcement questions and I don't want to say soften, but actually make it more palatable and more likely to pass muster, that if we took out a couple of these and revised them and then bring it back next week. And then Commissioner Kula, if you had suggestions on what you thought we could do to, because I know you've expressed, I guess on both sides, are you in favor of people showing their medical information? Is this something you would be against?
Yes, I don't think that, thank you, Chair. To your point about the ordinance, I think if you are excluding every other entity that's covered by the executive orders and the new mask guidance, then this is horribly punitive to businesses. But personally, I don't think we should be prohibiting telling businesses, telling civic organizations, telling churches what they can and cannot do on their property around this. We've already placed enough burdens on them. And I say we being because we are, we've sworn to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Oregon is actually the language. I looked it up in statute. So we are partly responsible for this. It's been hard on businesses, it's been hard on churches, it's been hard on choirs. Prohibiting them from doing something is, in my opinion, not the right course of action from us. And I realize it's a small part of the county in terms of the number of businesses and the number of organizations. I don't even have that. And honestly, I don't even know which businesses right now are asking people for their proof of vaccination. But what I do know is that it's, in my view, it is inappropriate to be asking people for people's medical information at the door of a business. But I do know that there is an option for every single business, every single workplace, which is to maintain that mask mandate in their business. They have the right to do that as runners of organizations, operators of businesses.
I just thank you for that. I would disagree that we have anything to do with putting any of the the problems that businesses have as a result of the lockdown. It is not anything that we have done. This has happened because of the governor's orders. And so I don't think that we bear responsibility for that. What we do bear responsibility for is helping them to navigate this. So when you say that it is not appropriate to tell businesses what to do, well, the governor has told businesses you have to require masks and you have to stand 6 feet apart and you have to limit capacity and you have to shut down at certain hours and some businesses can't operate. So I think that if that's being done, on one hand, then if it's wrong for it to be done, it's wrong for the governor to do it, just like it would be wrong for us to do it. So you're saying, well, it's wrong for us to prohibit businesses from doing something. They're already being prohibited from doing plenty.
But Chair, I don't think, with respect, because sorry, I shouldn't have jumped into it so quickly. We don't need to add to their burden. And again, this is not just businesses. Every entity covered by the new mask guidance is affected by this, and we, as a collective here, continue to talk solely about businesses. And every single one of them has the same legal challenge, except for maybe social gatherings, maybe.
I think I don't think we're adding to their burden. I think we're subtracting from their burden, because we're saying now, in addition to XYZ restrictions, now you have to ask people for their medical information. So I think that has been added. This is something else added to businesses. And I know we're probably all hearing from them, because I sure am. And they're saying, great, now we have to ask people for their medical information. So I don't think we're adding to anything. I think we're actually relieving them of some of the burden. But I think that there are, yeah, you're right. You bring up a number of concerns about, does this include social gatherings or any other venues? And I think that what I would suggest is that we come back, or that we, what would you be happy with? What would work for you as far as something that protects our businesses, protects our county to the degree that we can from vaccine passports? That's the object of the game. However imperfect and however flawed, that we need to get to that place where we can do that as an elected body. Not that there's not going to be pushback, because there is, but I think that our constituents would be most appreciative of any efforts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And what I've heard, I met with 75 businesses last Friday or Friday afternoon. I didn't think it was going to be 75 businesses, but it was. I heard a lot of resignation, a lot of concern, but a lot of people and business owners, staff, managers, who they said inevitably we are just going to keep that mask mandate in place. And so what I can do is I can go out and ask people, would you prefer we do something that may be illegal and doesn't apply to you, or do you want to keep the mask mandate? But that's not I think that's what you call a push-pull.
Yeah, I was on that. Go ahead.
Oh, did you join?
Yes, I was on the call, and I met with someone who was on the call.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I had nothing to add other than
I should have invited you and let you welcomed you and have you say.
No, I don't need any acknowledgement. It was important to hear what people had to say, and I did hear from businesses who were saying, "This is it. I can't do this." And when you hear people who are significant business owners in your community saying, "I'm gonna leave," that's concerning. But I also think that this is just drastic overreach, and I would like to do whatever I can do to say that we pushed back on this, and we just didn't take it lying down. So, Christian, I know that you love it when we get to work on these things together, and I'm just wondering. Go ahead.
Well, I think another important thing to think about, and maybe to have some additional conversation about, at the risk of extending us longer than we already are, is the enforcement concern and the enforcement question that Commissioner Berschauer raised. Right? I mean, thinking forward, if we had an ordinance in place, and you had a business that is following the state guidance and has a policy to ask for vaccination status when folks come in, and someone says you can't do that because there is a county ordinance, assuming it would apply to them, that says you can't. And then the business owner says, well, I'm following the state guidance that says I can. Who's violating which state law or county ordinance? And how do you resolve that dilemma? Okay, well, you're violating state law, so I'm going to call OSP, or, well, you're violating a county ordinance, so I'm going to call the sheriff. And then OSP and the sheriff show up and do exactly what?
That
issue
brings
a citation, issue a fine. That the reality of how to actually enforce something like this, and I think that challenge exists already for the state guidance, and is likely to be an issue that we hear more about. But I think I'm not sure how to resolve that dilemma, and I think that's a pretty important piece of this if we're going to invest additional time and resources in trying to move something forward that starts to address the concerns that you all have, which I hear.
I appreciate that, because it brings to mind when we have laws in Oregon that sort of countermand what federal laws are, for instance, marijuana. So if you sell marijuana, you are in violation of federal laws. So at what point do you say, I'm going to continue to do that? Or let's say federal immigration laws that are, that we've got, for instance, some things going on in Oregon that would be counter to those, or the legalization or decriminalization of certain drugs. So how do we reconcile that when you know, if you're selling marijuana, you're doing it counter to federal law, which says that that is illegal. The state of Oregon says it's perfectly legal. So really there's that preemption thing going on, and we break those laws all the time according to what the federal laws are.
Yeah, I don't know that we have enough time in the day to cover both of those issues in addition to the one that we're already discussing. But I think there are a number of differences that could be drawn and could be made. But I understand the fact that you're right. This is not the only instance where those questions might arise. But again, my point is, how do we intend to enforce this at the local level if we are interested in moving forward with some form of a ordinance? What does the board want to see happen in that sense?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we know that anything that we do, which is contrary to the guidance coming out of Salem, is going to be challenged or could be challenged. And we'll see that with the SASO. It's already maybe being challenged at the state level. But I don't think so. I guess what I would like to do is to work with you as to what it is that we could on the county level do as far as offering protections. And I don't know what that looks like as far as the enforcement piece of this. That's a tough one, but I want to be able to advance something in the county that looks like a protection for the citizens.
For citizens or for businesses, Chair?
Well, it's protections for the citizens from having to be quizzed on medical information. So yeah, it's protections for citizens, whether they're business owners or customers or congregants.
Chair, oh, yeah, Chair, I wanted to ask Commissioner Kula a question, because you come back to this, you know, situations or gatherings that might be outside of a business. And I remember reading in the OHA guidelines that the recommendation is, well, maybe it's not a recommendation, it's an order, but if you're having a social gathering, so let's say a wedding, and the attendees of the wedding are vaccinated for COVID, they don't have to wear a mask, but you as an individual are required to ask them for their vaccine status. So are you interested in protecting those people or not? I guess I'm unclear, and I'm not talking about a business wedding event. I'm talking about a private individual that's, you know, doing something where they're having a gathering.
Thank you, Commissioner Berschauer, for asking that clarification. I am in no way interested in prohibiting what a person at an event can or cannot do. I realize that the state of Oregon is comfortable doing that. They have rules about that. I am not interested in any way in us restricting or prohibiting them from doing whatever they want in their gathering, so long as it's legal by our criminal laws and the state of Oregon. But I view prohibiting businesses which is what this ordinance does, and enforcement is when the discussion was about enforcement, it was about enforcing this prohibition. I'm not interested in us enforcing a prohibition on any group of people in Yamhill County. I feel like they have enough of these kinds of things already. And it seems to be illegal.
So I have a right to ask for my wedding attendees vaccine passports before they attend if they don't want to wear a mask?
Are you asking me that question?
Yeah.
I am not a lawyer. I do not know the answer to that question.
Well, the governor just said I do have the right to do that. And by extension, so do businesses. But I heard you say you don't support that activity. So I'm trying to make that clear.
Oh, yeah, I get what you mean. So I can not support something and still not prohibit it, want to prohibit it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but there's only two options. That's the problem. It's not like we have a laundry list of options here. There's two.
There's
So-
prohibit and not prohibit, right? In this case, under this particular ordinance that's proposed. I think if we can give it some time and some discussion, I think we could come up with other things that might help businesses, organizations, individuals who are subject to the new state laws. But thank you. I really appreciate you asking for clarification on that.
Chair, I mean, I'm interested to see what comes out of this. If you want to alter it or edit it to some degree, you know, I'm interested to see that. Obviously, things can change if this isn't passed immediately, but I think it's worth doing, and time is of the essence, really.
Okay, so
I did find some default language in the statute. If we don't otherwise set a enforcement mechanism, violation of a county ordinance is a Class A violation under ORS 153.018, which is subject to a maximum fine of $2,000.
and who is and the fine then is the county levied fine?
Mhm.
Okay.
The county would levy the fine on an individual
Correct.
who was
Violating
found
the
to
ordinance. And
violate our
presumably it would be enforced either through the sheriff's office or through our code enforcement, which we haven't used our code enforcement in that way before, and that would be a real departure from past practice. And I think we'd have to have a conversation about whether or not folks agree that that is an appropriate role for our code enforcement officer to play. So basically, I think when we've talked about this before in terms of enforcement, it's code enforcement, it's environmental health, potentially enforcement, or sheriff's office.
Thank you. So, well, I appreciate the discussion, and we're not going to come up with a document today, and we knew we weren't going to. There's just so much that has to be discussed. But I think that if you have any suggestions or input for county council, I would appreciate that. And I know that that Christian has been very forthcoming about some of the concerns that he has about this. So I'd like to work on it and to bring something back next week. So if you have any suggestions, if you would send them to Christian, and we'll just continue the discussion next week, if that's okay, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to be very careful about making sure that information that we're received isn't being quote unquote discussed or deliberated upon outside of next week's meeting. So it may be a situation where we bring a number of those ideas that have been received back before the full board for further discussion next week.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, if we send them to you individually without copying each other, and then basically you're looking at suggestions from us. And
to the extent I can take all of those suggestions and synthesize them into a document that is consistent and coherent, I will do that and then bring it to you to consider next week. But I suspect I may receive information that may be contradictory or may not resolve itself into a cohesive document, at which point we would have to have a further discussion about that next week too.
right.
And I wouldn't be in a position to share that revised draft before the meeting. Right, it would need to be something that once it was drafted, we could put it onto the website, but then it would be subject to discussion by the full board at next week's meeting.
Okay, so as far as protocol, would you not be able to share, just like when we send items to Ken to share with the other commissioners, we will send them to Ken. He will send them to the other commissioners, which is informational to an formal session.
I think
it's information only.
That's information only, just to clarify, because typically when a commissioner shares something to share, it's strictly informational and it's not intended, it's not a prediction that I want to approve this, or, it's not a form of deliberation or a vote being had. It's just strictly an informational.
So what I need to avoid, and what I think we as a body need to avoid, is circulating drafts and having proposals on different drafts happening behind the scenes outside of a public meeting. So if I receive input and put that into a draft and we put that draft onto the agenda, I think that is okay. If I were to circulate that draft to the commissioners, then receive further comment from the commissioners and make additional revisions to that before next week, that's where I think we'd run afoul of public meetings laws. So you can individually provide information, and then we'll try and put that into a document that we can bring back and have the board discuss as a group next week.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of that, not that we would all be like redlining each other's stuff. No, I think I know better at this time. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. Christian, did you say that the enforcement mechanism from these new directives from OSHA is that if you violate them, there is a county levied fine?
No, there's a state fine. I have it here, and I think violation of the order is a Class C misdemeanor. I've got so many documents in front of me, but there is a violation at the state level if you violate the guidance, but that's not a county issue.
So if there's a compliance issue, a report would go to OSHA. OSHA, if it's a workplace issue, they would investigate. They have an enforcement wing. They would be the ones. While we have internal personnel practices to make sure that we stay compliant with all the OSHA regulations and make, we're not going out and enforcing OSHA complaints. That is strictly in the purview of OSHA.
Yeah, I was simply talking about enforcement of any ordinance that the board might adopt.
Okay, sorry, that wasn't clear to me, so thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, apologize.
But to clarify, Ken, I think we actually had this discussion regarding those environmental health visits, and we would be the ones issuing those warning letters. And then the question was, are they then reported to OHA for them to take further action?
And I think that's been an ongoing discussion and a large question mark, because up to this point, because you're right, we've had this question and we've talked to Director Manfred, and we've, that at what point, are our inspectors issuing citations for the, that's why up to this point, it's been informational. We've tried to give information. We haven't actually, that I'm aware of, actually cited a business for not complying with it. And I think there's still some questions out there about actual enforcement to that for violation of these rules, or so that's still an open question on next step of the process.
Because the question is who puts the lock on the door on a business that's got raw chicken dripping on the salad bar type of thing?
That one's more defined. That one, there are process, and I would probably want to have Lindsay or even Gary from Public Health provide more of the details on the specific protocols and process for that. But I do think that's our Christian.
Well, that particular example falls squarely in the historical framework of what our local county health officers would enforce when they're enforcing a public health and safety law, right? If you have raw food or you have some other clear public health and safety violation that's ongoing, they might act in a more specific enforcement capacity. And I think they've done that historically. The difficulty for these COVID enforcement issues has been we are being asked by the state to enforce in an area that is not what we have traditionally enforced in. And so that's been the sort of push-pull that's happened there. And that's why I think you've seen the majority of the enforcement actually come from either OSHA or OLCC as opposed to local health authorities, because it is something that most, and I think we would fall into that same category, most local environmental health offices don't have the infrastructure or the staff or the resources to do that kind of enforcement. It's just not the kind of enforcement that they've historically done.
Okay, well, thank you all for the discussion, and we can send our thoughts to Christian and hopefully make this as simple as possible, and then come back next week and find something that works as well as we can make it work. Do we have any?
Chair,
Yes.
do we have another agenda item? Because I just want to make sure that I bump up something if there isn't one.
We were going to talk about the wildfire.
But I think that one's, we clarified that one.
Right. There was
And-
nothing, I didn't have anything else other than that, which Ken clarified for us earlier.
I just want to note that last week, I think the way that we left it with the Dayton Landing Park is that we would schedule a work session. Is that correct?
Commissioner Bursch, go ahead.
Do you remember?
Chair, we had discussed that at the end. I would be in support of discussing or scheduling a work session on that.
I think we would need other players to be present. Maybe we could schedule it for next week and maybe, no?
Can I just say that just knowing on the agenda for next week, and I would also highlight that there's some discussions that we need to have about the Hellas Westsider Trail next week as well, that we may want to.
Couple of land use hearings too.
Yes, that we may want to. I think we're going to have a very full agenda for next week, and I have had an initial conversation with our parks manager about this specific topic, but it sounds like he's not possibly fully aware of this. And have we received a formal proposal, or is there one coming forward?
My understanding is that when I discussed this with city manager and mayor, they were waiting for an invitation to come and present. But what I can do is I can go back to them and ask for a formal proposal. You know, our process is sometimes bring it forward to you all and then come back, formalize it, bring it forward as a formal thing.
Yeah, because the only thing that I would just like to just put a plug in for, you know, is we do have our Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee as well. And, you know, much like other proposals that may come forward related to roads or things like that, we typically, you know, want to respect the fact that, hey, we'd like to see it presented to RIAC and get some feedback and see some recommendations there. And so I just wanted to put in a plug that we do have a Parks Board and a Parks Manager. And I don't, you know, other than a very brief 2-second email that I had to Ben that, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And so it's on your radar. I don't think it's been discussed. I don't know if it, or maybe it has been discussed and I'm just not aware of it.
Commissioner Burschauer?
Thank you, Chair. So there have been discussions. I've also been having discussions about the Dayton Landing issue, and it's come forward as concerns, not just from the mayor and staff there, but from constituents that live in the city. That said, I think it would be best if we did get a proposal and passed it, at least had a chance to have the Parks Committee weigh in on it before we schedule a work session, just because I think it would be more productive. I also want to have a little bit of time to do more research on my own as well. So you know, maybe the initial step is just to ask for the proposal. Once it comes in, then we can go from there.
Wouldn't it seem, I'm just wondering if in order of have it go to the Parks Board first and have them have some initial discussion, and then have them part of the process so that we're not kind of doing an end run around them?
Yeah, and they just met, so, it'd probably be another month.
And I don't think there's anything to say that they couldn't have, call a special meeting to have a discussion once they have something concrete in front of them, so that we could get on this. Commissioner Kula?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to, Ken had something to say, but I just have a question. So Ken, don't worry, is in terms of follow-up, would you like me to reach back out to city manager and mayor and ask them to prepare a formal proposal that goes to the Parks Advisory Board? Or Commissioner Bershauer, would it be more appropriate for you as the liaison to Parks?
That's a Ken question.
I mean, I could take it and present it to the parks manager, and then he can present it to the parks board as far as, or the city is more than welcome. I mean, the parks board meetings are just like every other meeting as well. The city could attend and present the proposal themselves directly to the parks board. And the only thing I was going to add, and I know I didn't answer your question on process. I think it's up to you. I think, it's up to the board on what you would like to see process-wise for a proposal like this coming forward. And the only other thing I was going to add is I've also asked Ben in that same communication, because realizing there's been a lot of discussions with the State Marine Board over the years on various reconstruction and potential grant and what the project may look like down at the site. That I've asked him to also reach out to the State Marine Board, and I've asked for an update, kind of where the status of things are on preparing a project for down there at Dayton Landing. So,
Commissioner Bershauer.
Chair, to answer part of Commissioner question, it's on my list. I would like to go out there and actually see the park and meet with the mayor and talk about it as a preliminary. So perhaps during that conversation, I can let her know that this is something that we're talking about if they're interested. So, and I do have one thing that's not related, but as part of the agenda, I wanted to ask about when we're there.
Okay, are we all pretty clear on next steps on Dayton? Okay, thank you, everybody. And thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner. Thank you. Commissioner Bershauer.
We're there. Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to, I know we discussed, or Ken mentioned, that we're going to talk about the trail, Yamhellis Trail, next week, but can we get a quick update on a couple of things? There was an ODOT letter sent Monday, was it Monday? And then a status like with Farline, and if anything's changed there.
The quick update I can provide, correct, Commissioner, I sent the letter as requested to ODOT on Monday, and I have not received a response other than a read receipt attached to the email. So they did receive it, and so no further updates on that. The second part is I did reach out to Farline and also Dell, one confirming that they did receive payment for the outstanding invoices, and I heard back, in fact, right before we went into session this morning, because I reached out on Monday and I heard back from both Farline and Dell just before we came into session this morning. So because part of that is I asked per the board's request for them to look at the previous decommissioning proposal. Now that because I think it was getting confusing because there was a lot of closeout contract and outstanding invoices kind of mixed in with the decommissioning. So I asked again for taking a look at that decommissioning proposal and and presenting something and getting back to me. And Joey from Farline did respond. Both Marissa and Joey did respond to me today that they are working on that. So I hope to have something, because I had asked to have something by next Thursday's formal, so I can present it to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Any questions? Anything else for the good of the order? Ken?
Nope.
Christian? Nope. Christian doesn't have anything either. Look at that. Thank you all. Go ahead.
Save it till next week.
Yeah, okay, good. We'll be hanging on every word. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate the discussion. And we'll see you next Thursday, if not before.
Thank you.
And thanks, Carrie and Carolina.
Yes.